Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Saturday, the 7th of October. Today, after the Labour Party heralded yesterday's success in the Scottish by-election, they called it seismic. Well, today we're asking, is Scottish independence facing an earthquake?
And have you noticed it's turned much warmer recently? Apparently we're experiencing an unusual blast of warm October weather, hurrah! But how long will it last?
A New York appeals court has temporarily halted Donald Trump's property dissolution amid his civil fraud case appeal.
And Jonathan Vautry has your all-important weather.
Some of us will be seeing some very warm sunshine today. For others, though, there's heavy, persistent rainfall in the forecast. So do join me later for all the details of what you can expect.
And Chris Scudder has your sports today. Huge day, Chris. What we got?
Yeah, morning. Who's going through to the Rugby World Cup quarter-finals? England and Wales are. Can Scotland join them by beating Ireland?
Well, it's lovely to be with you this lovely morning. Looking forward to some nice barbecue weather as well. We'll tell you all about that later on. Good morning. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Yeah, I mean, you don't expect this sort of weather in October. That's what's making it pretty historic. A lot of the papers this morning are sort of talking about an October heat wave.
I'm absolutely loving it.
And certainly it was lovely weather yesterday in most parts.
I was in my garden yesterday, did a bit of planting, had a can of beer in the sun. It felt like...
You don't expect to in October,
Just felt amazing, and long may it continue. Some people say, oh, it's climate change, it's terrible. But I'm saying it feels blooming good.
Yeah, well, I think it is climate change. What's causing it, or, you know, what bits of climate change you want to argue about is up to you. But if the weather is nice in your garden or on your balcony or wherever you can get out to in the park, then enjoy it while you can, because we thought summer was well and truly over, didn't we?
And let us know what you're going to do today. gbviews@gbnews.com, of course. The papers are all saying this is the last weekend to have a barbecue. There is some wet weather up in Scotland, so we have a north-south divide. We've got Nathan Rouse to talk us all through that in the show. But I'm saying it feels fantastic. Let's get stuck in.
It does. How are you going to spend the last few moments of summer over the next few days? We'd love to hear you. gbviews@gbnews.com. And if you've got any pictures of what your garden is looking like, maybe, like Martin, you were actually out in the garden doing stuff you wouldn't think of doing in October. Planting, you said you were planting.
Yeah, and I've got some of next year's plants coming up already. They're completely confused. It's that time of year. Well, they don't know what time of year
and that's a bit of a worry almost, isn't it? But if you were out in the garden yesterday afternoon, we'd love to see a picture. We do like a picture on a Saturday morning. Send it to us, gbviews@gbnews.com. Meanwhile, a lot of politics is going on, and so our top story this morning is following Sir Keir Starmer's claim that Labour blew the doors off Thursday's Scottish by-election. But you have to ask, don't you, where does this leave the SNP?
You do, because Labour's Michael Shanks won 58.5% of the vote in the latest by-election with a larger-than-expected swing of a whopping 20.4%. indicating that the SNP's dream of independence perhaps is dying.
Now, it's all very well for the politicians to talk it one way or another and to talk about statistics, but if you're a Scot and you really did believe in independence, has your dream been shattered? And if you're a Scot that thinks the other way, are you at last thinking maybe we're seeing some sense at last?
Yeah.
Who knows? Our reporter Tamsin Roberts takes a look at the background of Labour's newest Scottish MP, Michael Shanks.
Meet Labour's newest Scottish MP, Michael Shanks, who won more than 50% of the vote to take the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election, putting a smile on his boss's face, who hope it's a sign of things to come at the general election.
I've been determined from the moment I took over as leader of the Labour Party to take us from one of the worst defeats since the 1930s for us to a general election victory, and that's why we've worked so hard to change the Labour Party. I've always said the route to that general election runs through Scotland, and that is because I know how strongly so many people in Scotland want change.
It feels incredible to represent the community that I live in, the community that I love, but also I do feel the responsibility of the thousands of people that have put trust in me.
This is an absolutely extraordinary result, a seismic result, and I think this will send shockwaves through the SNP.
But what else do we know about the 35-year-old teacher turned politician? Well, he's previously hit the headlines away from the world of politics for running all of Glasgow's 6,000 streets. He took on this incredible challenge at the beginning of the first COVID lockdown as a way of making the most of his daily exercise. But does he have any experience of politics? Well, kind of. He's unsuccessfully stood for election before, 3 times between 2012 and 2017. He also quit the Labour Party on the day of the 2019 general election in protest at the party's stance on Brexit. And he continues to have different opinions to the Labour leader, particularly, it seems, over a potential plan to re-engage, if not rejoin, the European Union. Tamsin Roberts, GB News.
My goodness.
Well, earlier...
I was just thinking, my goodness, you know, what a reaction from so many people.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the MP has had a few beefs with Keir Starmer historically, so that, I think, is really healthy. I think it's healthy that people disagree in politics on things like Brexit, and it allows us to have more fruitful conversations about what brings us together. And
was their success the other day seismic? Or, I mean, we know in some quarters they just say, no, it was just another swing.
There's lots of evidence, though, lots of talk of tactical voting, of the Conservatives swinging to Labour, just to boot the SNP of the old posterior.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which will have an effect, won't it? Well, earlier on, our reporter Tony Maguire spoke to some of the local people and asked them if this means their dream, perhaps, of independence is dead.
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
I hope it's dead. Fingers crossed.
I think there's bigger issues to sort out than independence.
I think it's dead. We've not heard much about it now. It used to be all over the news, but you don't hear it now.
Hopefully it would be, we would go to independence.
Smashing, frankly. I think independence is there's still a chance of it, or...
I don't support independence, so I voted for the Labour candidate.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it does seem that the mood is relatively downbeat. Bear in mind that was previously an SNP seat, although Tom Hall pointed out today it is a seat that's flip-flopped a lot historically.
Yeah.
Corbyn won that seat.
Yes.
So it's one that's up for grabs. But anyway, joining us now is our political commentator, Alex Armstrong. Good morning to you, Alex. So, yeah, the big question is, after that seismic by-election victory, is independence facing its own existential earthquake? Is the independence dream dying for the SNP?
Yeah, it's a fascinating day for the SNP. They traditionally, even in terms of turbulence in British politics, the SNP have managed to hold on to those seats. They've won 9 out of 11 by-elections in the past. So, I mean, look, I don't know whether the independence itself, the view of independence is going to go away. I think that's something that's going to stick around for quite some time. But, to have Hamza Yousaf yesterday say that, we don't want to take this sign of general election next year. Frankly, I don't know whether that's going to be something that the SNP agree with. He is down at a -7% on his own approval rating. So, look, let's see what happens over the next few weeks with his own leadership. I would be very fascinated to see it.
I mean, the SNP historically are very, very good at grassroots politics, aren't they? They're very good at knocking on doors and lobbying for their point of view. But, of course, up until now, they've had Nicola Sturgeon at the helm for quite a long time anyway, who is a terrific speaker. So maybe they've just lost some of that momentum. Do you think they can ever get any of it back?
Well, look, I think the SNP thrive on a strong leader. And as I was just saying, despite, Hunter being on the Times Magazine's front page the other day, I think they're suffering from that lack of leadership at the moment, and that's really going to damage the SNP's attempt to, swing more voters to the cause of independence. Now, does that mean that they're going to get wiped out of the next general election? I don't know, and I think it's very important to say that by-elections are not a strong reflection of what a general election would look like. But that being said, I think there's a lot of questions about his leadership and whether he's the man that can take the SNP to the true goal of its whole political party, which is independence in the first place.
It certainly seems, if you look at the polling on independence, the appetite is lessening. In fact, there's been no appetite for a majority view on independence since November 2020, Alex, and the gulf is widening. Of course, polls aren't the real world. No polls predicted Brexit, no polls predicted Donald Trump. But it does seem that with Sturgeon falling away and the scandal that enveloped the party and Yousaf, it has to be said, seeming divisive, a lot of people are starting to say that independence is withering on the vine.
Yeah, I mean, look, I actually was living in Scotland during the Better Together, the independence referendum campaign, and I was out on the street talking to Scottish people. It is a very divided nation on this topic, and I still think today that hasn't changed. I don't know whether polls are reflective of Scotland's opinion on the union. But what I'll say is this, that there are a lot of Scottish people who are very passionate about being independent. And I'd say the same about Brexit here in the UK, in England, where a lot of English people are very passionate about that. And people don't tend to change their minds with the wind on that one. That's something that seems to be an entrenched value in people. It seems to be very difficult for that very small minority of people to swing their thoughts on it. They do need to win sort of 20% of those prior union voters to get over the line. I don't think it's going away, I'll be honest with you. I really don't. I think independence is something that the SNP will use as a hook for the next general election. I think they'll try and bounce back, but I do think they'll have questions about their leader. And I think that's a very important thing for us to talk about.
Fascinating to see, yeah. Suddenly, for even those who weren't terribly interested in what was happening in Scotland, suddenly I think it is very, very interesting and could be highly influential on the general election, couldn't it? Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's have a look at some of the other stories that are coming into the newsroom this morning.
Yeah, the UK is on course to see its biggest tax rise in at least 50 years as a result of the freeze on personal thresholds and soaring inflation. According to new analysis by the Resolution Foundation, taxpayers are set to hand over a whopping 40 billion quid a year by 2028, up from a forecast 30 billion at the time of Chancellor Jeremy Hunt's budget in March. The government's policy is to keep income tax and national insurance thresholds frozen until 2028. It comes as Mr Hunt ruled out sizable tax cuts this year amid Tory calls for a pre-election giveaway at the Conservative Party conference.
Northern and southern parts of the UK will continue to see a contrast in weather this weekend, with high temperatures and torrential rainfall affecting different areas. The Met Office has issued both amber and yellow rain warnings for large parts of Scotland and northern England through to tomorrow morning. And train services in Scotland are expected to be disrupted, with some operators warning passengers not to travel because of the rain.
Well, a north-south divide on the weather too. Moving on, Rishi Sunak has said he hopes tensions between Canada and India will de-escalate after a diplomatic row over the killing of a Sikh separatist leader. Last month, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said in Parliament there were credible allegations that India was involved in Hardeep Singh Nijjar's death. In retaliation to the comments, India told Canada that 41 of their diplomats would be removed from the country.
OK, well, if you're set to mourn the passing of summer hold on, because winter is not here yet, and you could even say maybe not autumn as well, because we are going to enjoy temperatures, or at least some of us are, temperatures of something like 22 degrees for the next 5 days.
Fantastic. Temperatures today could reach 25 degrees today and up to 27 degrees on Sunday, making it unusually and spectacularly warm for an October.
Yeah, they're calling it an October heatwave. Wow. Here to tell us more, weather journalist Nathan Rao. Good morning.
Good morning.
Real smiles on our faces.
Oh, aren't we
now.
cheerful this morning? The summer is back.
Yeah, except there is this north-south divide that we've been hinting at, and spectacular rain happening.
Yes.
So shall we start with the bad news first?
Yeah, bad news first is across Scotland. Now, this is where the jet stream is positioned, which is sort of why we're getting the warmer air in the south. But the jet stream is right across Scotland, and this is where there's going to be some very, very heavy rain, as you mentioned, between now and 6 a.m. tomorrow morning.
How heavy?
7 inches in quite a short time. So that is a lot of rain. And there is an amber Met Office weather warning within a yellow weather warning, really across the whole of Scotland, for flash flooding, possible damage to buildings, disruption to travel, and there's also a danger to life warning, warnings for people to be careful when this sort of intense rainfall comes very quickly. It can cause flash flooding. But elsewhere, it's a much better picture.
It makes you wonder if Nicola Sturgeon's been doing a rain dance, doesn't it? After the Labour by-election. So where is that jet stream coming from? And like, why is this weather unseasonally upon us?
Right, so the jet stream, this is the polar front jet stream, and that is a band of very fast-moving air that runs sort of around the northern hemisphere, and that is moved further north than we would expect it at this time of year. And when the jet stream moves further north, that allows high pressure to build from the south, and there is a warmer, sort of almost, you could say, a heat wave across Europe at the moment, and that high pressure across the south with the northerly positioned jet stream is allowing that warm air to come up from the south. So we're getting temperatures of 27 degrees tomorrow, which is really unusual for this time of year.
OK, Nathan, we're going to come back to you for a bit more on that heat wave in just a couple of moments. But right now it's time for some headlines, and it is exactly 6:15. So a reminder of our top story this morning. After the Labour Party heralded yesterday's success in the by-election as seismic, today we have to ask, don't we, is Scottish independence facing a bit of an earthquake?
And as we just discussed with Nathan Rao, have you noticed it's turning much warmer recently? Apparently we're experiencing an unusual blast of warm October weather, but how long will it last?
And then in New York, an appeals court has temporarily halted Donald Trump's property dissolution while it's going on, his civil fraud case appeal. Well, we'll find out a bit more about the weather now. Here we go.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry, here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Certainly a different feeling day for those in the north to those in the south. High pressure is pushing in from continental Europe, importing heat for southern areas, but this trailing frontal system is going to be providing very heavy and persistent rain across much of Scotland throughout the day. There is an amber weather warning in force, with flooding and disruption to transport likely in places, the potential for a month's worth of rainfall to fall in some locations. May even lead to some shallow landslides, so do take care. For Northern Ireland, Wales and England, a largely dry day, some hazy sunshine around at times, temperatures climbing towards 23 degrees Celsius in the southeast, where we'd normally be around 16 degrees at this time of the year. The rain will continue, though, across Scotland as we head overnight. Again, some heavy pulses around at times. Other areas generally staying dry, but we'll start to see some cloud push into eastern areas of England overnight, turning a little bit murkier here. Most of us, though, seeing temperatures hold up around 12 to 13 degrees Celsius, so a fairly mild start to Sunday. The rain across Scotland will gradually push its way northwards during the day on Sunday. Still some heavy pulses for Aberdeenshire, the Highlands to begin with, and then eventually into the Northern Isles later on. The cloud in the east will be a bit stubborn to clear throughout the morning, but into the afternoon some brighter spells should develop, but it will be Wales, southwest England that sees the best of the sunshine. On Sunday, temperatures, though, again climbing towards 25 degrees Celsius in parts of London. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
So there you are, that's your forecast, but Nathan is still with us to try and tell us why we're having, in October, a heat wave that, frankly, I expected in September, but it never came.
Well, actually, September was one of the hottest on record, if you can believe that.
Yeah, it wasn't in my garden.
It wasn't, no, but if you remember at the very beginning of September, we had that long spell of 30 degrees. But anyway, so it was one of the hottest Septembers on record. But yes, we are now into October, and we're looking at temperatures of 27 degrees tomorrow. That could be the hottest October temperature for more than 10 years. 2011, we saw saw 29.9 on the 1st of October. So this is really, really unusual, and it's because I was mentioning the jet stream is much further north than we'd expect at this time of year, which is allowing the warm air up from the south and the high pressure to build over the UK, which means lovely, almost summer-like blue skies and sunshine for us, certainly for the weekend and possibly into the middle of next week.
Now, what we always like, Nathan, is a city-by-city comparison. So, for example, is Bognor hotter than Barcelona?
Yes, right. Well, Ibiza at the moment is 26 and Istanbul is 25, so we could be beating both of those.
That's crazy.
It is. It's absolutely... I mean, it's not unheard of, but it's very, very unusual. And this is also countrywide. I mean, the warmest temperatures will probably stay in the south of the country through the start of next week. But it's the whole of the UK, apart from where we saw the rain in Scotland today, which is a more serious issue.
But it's still warm.
But it's still warm, and the whole of the UK is going to be lovely and warm and sunny, which is very unusual for this time of year, but not to be sniffed at. I think we're all happy about that.
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of people are going to make the very most of it. We'd love to hear from you as to what you're going to be doing this afternoon that maybe you never thought you would be doing on an October Saturday. Funnily enough, Dean says, morning, Dean, I'm starting Christmas shopping today. Is it too early?
Oh, no, you're getting your Easter eggs in next. Andy says this, the season has gradually been hotter later over the years. I now plant my tomatoes in July and August, with harvesting late in October. Andy, I bet you get 2 crops in.
Yes, you could get 2 crops in. That's great.
Yeah.
And B says, our son and daughter-in-law bought us a pizza oven. So guess what we're going to be having this evening?
Oh, I've got garden
Take it
envy.
outside and have it outside in the sun.
I've got garden envy there, B.
Do stay with us. Coming up, a New York appeals court has temporarily paused the dissolution of Donald Trump's valuable properties while it considers his appeal in a civil fraud case. Stick with us. This is Breakfast on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin. The time, 22 minutes past 6.
Yeah, a New York State appeal court has temporarily halted the dissolution of some of Donald Trump's most valuable properties as it weighs the former US president's appeal in a civil fraud case.
Yes, and meanwhile, no matter what everybody seems to be throwing at Donald Trump, his ratings go up, and he is definitely, isn't he, the front runner to be the Republican candidate. Let's talk now to a friend of the programme. We often ask ask his advice on these subjects, because it gets ever more complicated the other side of the pond. Steve Gill, who, of course, is a former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations. Lovely to see you again. Can you explain to us what's going on with Donald Trump? I am absolutely confused now as to how many litigations he's having to fight, whilst also, as I said, appearing to be such a strong front-runner for the Republican candidacy.
You guys are just happy that our politics are making yours seem sane and normal by comparison. So
you are so right.
It's okay right now. You know, this particular case in New York is even more bizarre. When I put on my lawyer hat, this judge ruled in one judgment. And keep in mind that in a summary judgment, there is no dispute of any facts. And yet in this case, value Mar-a-Lago, Florida at 18 million.
Yeah.
Where it says
Steve, I'm so sorry, but we're losing every other word that you're speaking at the moment, so we need to sort out the sound if we can. We'll come back to you in a few moments, and hopefully the techie people might have been able to sort things out. Meanwhile, shall we go to sport?
Yeah. So we've got a big day ahead in rugby, and here to talk about that is Chris Scudder. So, Chris, lots of home nations' interest in this. Talk us through the action.
Yeah, I mean, this is the time of the World Cup when it really starts getting interesting. You know, the problem with the Rugby World Cup is that you always get the same teams in the final stages, really. But yeah, we're expecting England and Wales definitely through. Big talking point today is, can Scotland squeeze through in a really, really tough group, because they've had South Africa and Ireland, and that's really unfair, really. It's just the way the cookie crumbles in terms of the draw. But should Scotland beat Ireland today, and they do it with a bonus point, or they don't let Ireland get a losing bonus point, that sounds very technical, but if you lose by less than 7, you get an extra point. But basically, if Scotland win today, it looks like they might squeeze through, which would be a sensational achievement by them.
And the South Africans are grumbling about this, aren't they? Because they say technically it might be possible if the Scotland-Ireland result fell in a certain way, they'd be squeezed out, and there could be allegations of match fixing.
Yeah, but listen, you know, they lost to Ireland, so, you know, if that happens, so be it. But I mean, that would be an unusual turn of events, I think, if the South Africans were to go out. I mean, listen, all things being equal, Ireland have beaten Scotland 8 times in a row, and they've won 16 successive international rugby matches, and they are the best team in the world. They've messed it up in the past in Rugby World Cups. I've got a feeling that they'll do it this time. They are by far and away, I think, the best side at the minute. England and Wales, meanwhile, are going to be winning their 4th games in a row at the group stage. But, you know, all things being equal, they're probably not going to get past the semi-final, because the teams on the other side of the draw, France, who won last night, South Africa, New Zealand and Ireland, are that little bit better. So, you know, we're going to talk about that about 20 past 8, I think. We've got some guests who have been there and have worn the badge and know what it is to be hit by a 10-ton truck to
Can I ask probably a very ignorant question, but I don't know an awful lot about rugby. But you know the Kevin Keegan controversy about saying he doesn't want to hear female commentators talking about the men's match. Is that the same in rugby? Are there any female rugby
Yes, there are. I mean, there
commentate on men's matches?
Yes, there are. Yeah. ITV use female pundits. I mean, Kevin, I think in his defence, did say that he likes female presenters, but didn't like pundits who haven't played in the men's game. That was his point, I think. But nonetheless, it was a bit awkward. And you know, Kevin, I remember as I worked with him when he was the England football coach. He speaks very openly and very candidly. But yeah, they do, yes, in the answer to your question, Anne, they do.
A lot of people like him for it, though. A lot of people agree with him.
Yeah, sure.
And a lot of people think he has a fair point. Now, if you're going to commentate on sports at an elite level, it helps to have experienced it yourself. Back to the rugby. The first big game between Ireland and South Africa, a lot of people were saying that the winner of that was most likely going to win the whole tournament. Who's your money on to lift the cup?
I think Ireland will win it.
Yeah.
But, you know, they have fallen every time when they were supposed to do much better. And they've got a knockout game today. Before we even get to the quarterfinals, they've got a knockout game against Scotland. That might take its toll. But we'll see. France getting through last night, they beat Italy by 60 points to 7. So they've won their 4 group games. England will do the same today. Wales do the same. They've got Samoa and Georgia. But you know, as I say, I mean, all the big nations start lining up now for the quarterfinals next week, and it's pretty brutal. The Rugby World Cup, the standards are getting so high now, the fitness levels and the power of the hits. If you've seen, the injuries to players, it's pretty brutal stuff, and that makes it. There's something about rugby which really does stir the blood at international level, doesn't it? I mean, it's
of both sexes, indeed.
Indeed.
Yeah, Chris, good, super stuff. Well, we'll look forward to that big heads-up debate later on.
Indeed.
Indeed. Right now, it's 28 minutes past 6. This is Breakfast on GB News with Anne and Martin. Our headlines today, after the Labour Party heralded yesterday's success in the by-election as seismic, that's the one in Scotland, of course, we're asking, is Scottish independence now a thing of the past?
And have you noticed it's turned much warmer recently? Apparently we are experiencing an unusual blast of warm October weather. The big question, though, is how long will it last?
And a New York appeals court temporarily halted Donald Trump's property dissolution amid his civil fraud case appeal.
And coming up, we'll take a look back on Suella Braverman's speech this week, a controversial one on immigration during the Conservative Party conference in Manchester. And coming up, councils, universities and police forces have developed male menopause. The menopause policies. Has the world gone stark raving mad? We'll be talking that next in Headline Makers. This is GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. This is Breakfast on GB News with me and Martin. Now, just a few minutes ago, we were trying to figure out what's going on the other side of the Atlantic with the latest news on Donald Trump, because we hear... Well, no, I tell you what, let's go to Steve Gill, see if we can re-establish communication with Steve Gill, former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations. And sorry about that, Steve, we obviously had techie problems there. But could you explain, in words of hopefully only one syllable, what on earth is going on with Donald Trump at the moment, and why, no matter how much legal stuff is thrown at him, he is still such a front-runner in what's going to be the presidential race?
Yeah, my communications was as chaotic as this court case is. The bottom line is Trump is extremely popular, and every time they put another legal case against him, his popularity goes up. I think this particular case in New York is even more bizarre than most of them. In this case, the judge took a motion for summary judgment, which means that there is no dispute of fact that is significant, and yet the court is disputing whether or not the Mar-a-Lago estate's worth $18 million, which is ridiculous, or more like $500 or $700 million, which is more accurate. And the court just ignored that and did its own ruling. And now you've got a court of appeals that has said that the court moving right to the judgment phase, that they're going to take away Trump's ability to do business in New York, is premature as well. So I think, again, you have a partisan judge, a partisan DA, and the American people are seeing through this, and that's why his popularity goes up every time he gets another hit from these politically motivated cases.
And Steve, there's an extraordinary outburst earlier this week when Donald Trump lost the plot in New York when he basically said the entire legal system is corrupt and against him. This is politically motivated. It should be out there in Ohio, in Nashville, campaigning for this first wave. And instead, he's intimating the entire system is rigged against him. It seems to be playing well with his base, though.
Well, and keep in mind that each of these cases are in what we call dark blue states. They're in New York City, they're in Washington, D.C., they're in places where Trump lost with, 90% of the vote going against him. So I think there's an argument that they're not only playing these partisan Democrat judges and DAs against him, but they're putting them in cases and places where there's really not a chance for a fair trial. And I think when you're a public figure as visible as he, or people on the other side of the aisle as well, it would be hard to find somebody that could give a fair trial who didn't come in with a prejudged notion about how they felt about Donald Trump or any of the other top political figures in this country right now.
And Steve, another extraordinary moment this week, a seeming U-turn from the Biden administration saying that they now plan to build the wall. Donald Trump's idea.
Yeah, they were for it before they were against it, and now they're for it against. Again, it's crazy, and I don't know how that's going to play politically. They're now trying to take a completely different tack to build a wall. They promised they wouldn't build 1 inch of wall, and now they're trying to have the Secretary of Homeland Security, Mayorkas, say we need the wall, while Biden says it won't work. Again, it is a complete muddled mess. But the bigger issue is we got 18 to 20 million illegals that have flooded across our border, are filling our big cities, and nobody knows what to do about it. Building a wall will not remove the ones who are already here illegally, and that's the big problem.
It's incredible, isn't it? We started off this interview with you saying that your politics almost makes ours look, natural and normal. But we've all got the same problems, actually, haven't we?
Yeah, and nobody's listening to the people. Again, you've got Joe Biden talking about issues that don't have any impact on the working class Americans. He's claiming Bidenomics works while inflation in our country is raising the price of bread and milk and gasoline. He's claiming that he's the law and order president while our big cities are devolving into chaos and crime, and is claiming that the border is closed while our own eyes can tell us millions are continuing to come across. What they're saying in the Biden administration doesn't fit what Americans are feeling and seeing. I think that's one of the reasons why he's lagging so badly in the polls, even against a wounded candidate like Donald Trump.
Great to talk to you, Steve. Thanks very much for trying to make some sense of it for us. Thank you.
It's absolutely fascinating, I think. Wherever you stand on the politics of this, it's going to be one hell of an election to watch. It's going to be the world's greatest circus.
Yeah. We'll have ours first, won't we?
Yeah.
I think, and then theirs. Yes,
yeah,
it will
come
be
after, yeah.
one long circus. OK, at 6:37, let's move on and take a look at the front pages of the newspapers this morning.
And after its victory in the Rutherglen by-election, the Eye reports of Labour's plan to solve the UK's housing crisis by building new towns and taxing developers.
And the new homes plan also on the front page there of The Guardian.
Labour policies also make the top story in The Times, with the Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting saying that the NHS must modernise or die.
And this is one you like, don't you? Menopause madness. It's the headline on the front page of the Mail, reporting quite seriously that dozens of public bodies and universities have what is called male menopause policies.
Yeah, wait till they hear about the man flu. And the death of the wife of former Manchester United football manager Sir Alex Ferguson is a lead story in The Star.
So there's lots to talk about. Joining us to go through some of those headlines, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and his wife, former Conservative... I can't believe I said that. And former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall.
You could have said his former wife. That'd have been worse.
They happen to be married. Well, that's true, yes. OK, look, Nigel, let's start with you then. And in The Guardian, Keir Starmer sort of talking about his new homes pledge.
Yes, this is this is a big week for Labour coming up. So the Labour conference begins in Liverpool tomorrow. Angela Rayner will kick it off with her new brief as Levelling Up Secretary, Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, and she's talking about homes at the moment. So the idea, and this is going to be, I think this is going to be a conference absolutely chock-a-block with policy, and they're gradually going to start leaking them out over the next couple of days. So this one is that the Tories had a target, 300,000 new homes. They haven't met the target. Labour are saying that'll be their benchmark. That's the target that they are heading for.
And how are they going to fund it?
Well, it's not so much funding it; it's actually getting through the problems of planning and also developers. So you have a situation where developers are land banking, getting hold of land, hanging on to it, waiting for prices to go up. So the issue really is to get the developers to actually develop the properties they're meant to. Also, ease planning rules so it all happens much quicker. The detail of that, one would hope, will actually be explained at the Labour conference.
Aren't they looking at what they're calling the Golden Triangle between Oxford, Cambridge and London?
I think they're looking really across the country.
Oh, there you go. Well, I heard... It's only because I live near Oxford that I was thinking... Oxford, Cambridge, there's an awful lot of green belt there, and there's going to be an awful lot of people who say, oh, yes, we need affordable homes, but not there.
And I wonder, Claire, if this is part... Look, the Labour Party have never got over the fact that Thatcher sold off council houses out there. They've been banging on about that for decades. Is this, do you think, a sort of reinvention of Labour as the party of social housing? Sounds great on paper. It sounds great on paper, scrapping planning rules. Sounds great on paper, taxing the property developers. But can any of this actually happen?
Well, I mean, that's where the detail needs to come in, because having sat on a local authority for 8 years, planning is the most contentious issue that you will ever have to deal with. And yes, people do want affordable homes, they want more houses, but nowhere near them. And this is your problem, is that you try and relax planning rules, local communities will go up against you. So I'm not sure how they're going to square that off and what kind of properties they're going to build. And the areas that they're looking at building in are beautiful green spaces. There may well be areas of outstanding natural beauty nearby, and you cannot just ride roughshod over these kind of rules. So I think it's really interesting that Labour have brought up housing, because the Conservatives in the week past didn't mention it, which I think is a real mistake. It's one of these issues which younger people will absolutely want to hear more detail on, and it really is a vote winner in that respect.
And it's a proper grassroots Labour.
Yes, it is. I mean, one of the things, the worries about the green belt, one of the things that will have to happen is how you designate green belt. So Keir Starmer discovered that there was a car park in Maidstone which was designated green belt, but while the school playing fields nearby weren't. So, in other words, you couldn't build on the car park, but you could build on the playing fields. So it's a matter of actually sorting out the rules.
But the fascinating thing about this is that people want to live where the work is. They want to live in cities. They don't want to live on brownfield sites. They don't want to live in the middle of nowhere. This idea of new towns keeps coming up, and they're putting this front and centre. New towns, very, very ambitious, but without the jobs, without the infrastructure... It's pie in the sky.
He's also talked about building them near railway lines, hasn't he?
Yes, all these things.
I mean, this is interesting if he comes up with some detail that makes...
Yes, I mean, the key thing is that what we've lacked from Labour all the way through is we don't get the detail. We get a rough idea of what policy is going to be, but we don't get the detail about how they're going to carry it out. This being the last conference before the next election, likely to be the last conference before the next election, what he's got to do is actually tell us how he's going to do things. It's not good enough to say, oh, my ambition is to do this, this and this.
What's your gut feeling? Do you think he will?
Yes, I do. Yeah, because I think that
now's the time.
Now is the time that he's been. He was gradually changing the Labour Party. He was setting up new ideas. Now he's got to explain in detail how they'll be carried out.
The era of fence sitting has to end. Pat McFadden told us yesterday.
Yes, he did.
Expect a policy-rich conference. Stop flashing your garter. Why? How are you going to make us jump into bed with you, so to speak, Keir Starmer? Because it's like we need to see some firm details.
And interestingly, it was Alistair Campbell and people like that, Mandelson and others were saying, now is the time to come out with real policies, even if it means you will be attacked for them.
Yes, I mean, the point that they were making, and there was a very good piece that The Guardian did yesterday about this, the point that these are all the characters who were around in 1996, and if you like, this year is the repeat of 1996 before the landslide in 1997.
Well,
do you think
is it?
Oh, I do think, well, at the moment, it looks like a landslide, yes. So what they were saying was that Starmer is actually proving himself to be competent. Now the trick is to also prove he is radical, which, of course, Tony Blair was.
So, final word on this, Claire, before we move on to the much more important topic of the menopause. Does all this kind of sabre-rattling by the likes of Campbell and Mandelson actually start to make people think, well, no, is Blair just another Tony... Is Starmer a Tony Blair puppet?
And I think that's the problem. The Tony Blair Institute is there in the background. It is working really hard. And when you have the names of Mandelson and Campbell coming back into the mix, I think some people are going to be worried about it.
And David Miliband as well. He was speaking yesterday.
And I think this is your problem, because people wanted a Labour Party that was different. They wanted something new. And it is now incumbent upon the Labour Party to put out there these policy ideas properly fleshed out, because suddenly being we're not the Conservative Party isn't going to be enough to get them past the post.
Absolutely.
Right.
So it's going to be an interesting conference.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Yeah.
It's going to be, we need to see some detail. Long may it continue. Right, I've been banging about...
No, hang on, let's do the headlines first, and then we can give the menopause the sort of breathing time that it needs. Yeah. It is just coming up to 7:15. A reminder of our top stories this morning.
And after the Labour Party heralded yesterday's success in the by-election in Scotland as seismic, today we're asking, is Scottish independence facing its own earthquake? We'll be debating that in this next hour.
And then, of course, have you noticed that it has turned much warmer recently? Apparently, we are experiencing an unusual blast of warm October weather. How long will it last? We'll give you all the details.
And coming up, we'll look back on Suella Braverman's controversial speech on immigration during the Conservative Party conference this week in Manchester.
So back to our headline makers, Nigel and Claire. And Claire, tell us about the front page, I think it is, of the Daily Mail.
Yep.
And it's all about menopause madness.
Which is absolute madness, I have to say. This is dozens of councils, university, police forces and fire services have designated that there can be a male menopause, and therefore male employees will be given flexible working rights. They can be allowed 12 months off on full pay because they experience symptoms of the menopause. Now, I have quite a big issue with this. I think this is absolutely ridiculous.
I think your curled lip and voice like a cheese grater gave it away. Go on.
Do you think so? I feel quite strongly about this.
Yeah.
This is not something that men will suffer from. Men might suffer from a midlife crisis. They might go and buy a sports car or a leather jacket, go and do something dangerous for fun, but they don't suffer the kind of physical symptoms that women will do. And I'm getting the look from that end of the table. I can feel it here. And I will put it out there that this is something women suffer. This is a woman's condition.
Yes.
And we have fought long and hard to have it recognised. We have fought long and hard to get the right treatments for it, which are still not coming through. There are HRT shortages across the country. The government cannot get this right. And then suddenly we're going to introduce men who might just feel a little bit upset when they're...
Can I just ask you, because obviously you've read right through that piece and talked about it before, is the word menopause something that the Daily Mail and other headline writers are coming up with? Or are these particular institutions recognising that word, menopause?
They're not necessarily recognising the word. I do think this is something that has been created for us, but they're not backing down on it either. So what you find is that the Daily Mail will come up with menopause, and these institutions will take it over. They're calling it the male menopause, which isn't a thing.
But it isn't a thing, no.
It isn't, and this is why I.
You have to menstruate and then stop menstruating, and that's what causes many of the problems for women.
That happens.
Men don't do that.
Exactly.
Right. So.
They might have problems.
The case for men, Nigel, I totally agree. I think the word menopause is ridiculous. It debases the issue and it tries to infer that men have a place in women's health, which is, I think, unfair. But, Nigel, men do go through certain changes and they do have certain issues, and I think this sort of stuff undermines all that.
And the point is bringing some common sense into this whole thing. Male menopause is the wrong description for it.
Yes.
And it's absolutely right that sort of demeans women. And I can understand why Claire is so angry about this. She should have seen her in the car on the way up. But the whole thing is that if you check... The answer is check the NHS website, because they have a really good explanation for this, but after the age of about 30 to 40, men's testosterone levels begin to go down about 1% a year. And that can cause a number of symptoms, depression, it can cause hot flushes, it can cause anxiety, it can cause lack of libido,
love handles,
mood swings, sorry?
Love handles, moobs.
Yeah, and all those things, yes. So there is a change in men. It doesn't affect all men. Something like a quarter at the most, 1 in 10 probably. But there are these changes. The issue there is not to actually say this is a menopause. It also is not an instant thing. It goes on for many years. But if you have those symptoms, it is quite right that an employer should have policies in place to actually treat them. So, like if you were suffering depression normally, that the employer would try and help you out, deal with that. So it's the headline that's wrong here.
Yes.
Don't call it menopause. I mean, the best description is age-related low testosterone, but it is sort of.
But what upsets me is whether these institutions are calling it male menopause, because they shouldn't be, should they?
I don't think they are.
But I think they are, and this is the point. They do have guidance internally that states that these are male menopause symptoms. And all of the symptoms that you've described there and the 1% drop in testosterone is not enough to make a material difference to a man. It isn't enough. Women go through such violent changes, realistically, with their hormone levels.
It does make a material difference to some men. That's the whole point.
But scientists themselves say that the drop-off of this 1% isn't enough to actually make it into a condition. It is something that naturally happens, and men can still father children into their 70s and 80s, whereas women have that cut-off point. So it isn't the same. This is a lengthy process, which I think is just known as ageing.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, age really gets you in the end, doesn't it? No matter what gender you might be.
I'd like to see them go further and legally and medically recognise man flu. But anyway, that's just...
Oh, yes, that's just you. Yeah. Let's move on to something that is really causing a stir at the moment, and that's bed bugs.
Yeah. Panic is said to be sweeping Paris and other French cities as infestations, what a horrible word, of bed bugs have soared in recent weeks, and there are fears that the UK could be the next target.
And it is quite frightening when you think about it. Let's bring in Robert Fryers, who's founder of Spotter, which is a company that uses technology to fight bug infestations. Robert, a very good morning to you. Bed bugs, how can you help us fight them?
Well, my company makes an AI monitor. I've actually got one here. It looks like this. And this tucks underneath a bed or in the train carriage or anywhere else, hospital bed, anywhere you might have a problem with bed bugs. And it then reports in real time and sends an email to the person who needs to know about it. And that's really key because vigilance is the solution to bed bugs.
How does it spot the bed bug? Does it take the bed bug to, crawl all over it, or what?
So there's a pheromone that attracts them inside, and then once they're inside, our AI system identifies it and can tell whether it's a bed bug or whether it's something else.
OK, there's probably a lot of people at home having their cup of tea and slice of toast, scratching their arms, listening to this, and I'm kind of one of them. So tell us, how is this a phenomenon? How are these bed bugs getting here? We're blaming France, but how they get... Well, they come on the Eurostar? Are they coming via dinghies?
Well, just to be absolutely clear, it's not actually France's fault. So bed bugs have been around in our cities, in our homes, in our towns since prehistory, and they have been an ongoing problem for decades. And it really started growing in the late 90s with the growing resistance to insecticide. They move around, they hitchhike. They move around on people's bags, on people's clothes. So if you're traveling, if you're on the underground, if you're on the metro in Paris, it's quite easy to pick them up and end up taking them home or taking them to the hotel you're going to. And then they get there and they can start spreading. So it's very, very difficult to control the spread of them. And the solution really is having systems in place to monitor continuously so that you catch it as early as possible. We had a couple of quiet years during COVID when no one was traveling. And that meant that the populations did drop away. But this year, because we've had a fantastic tourist season in London and in Paris, they've come back with a bit of a vengeance this year.
OK, well, we'll leave it there because it is one of those issues that I know people are waking up and having their first coffee of the morning or whatever. But it's really good to know that people such as yourself are working on it, thank goodness. Nigel and Claire,
thank you.
It's all horrible, isn't it, just to think of?
They're very big, aren't they? I mean, I didn't realise they were quite...
Well, apparently they're the size of an apple pip.
Yeah, which is big enough,
which is big.
isn't it?
Yeah. It is. Does it give you the creeps?
It really does. It really. You sort of sit there itching, and it's horrible the fact that they can hitchhike. It was that word hitchhike, so they can go into your bag, into your case, on your clothing, train seats, and travel around with you.
Well,
and
they're migrants, aren't they? I mean, the government could send them to Rwanda.
Well, It's interesting about staying in hotels. I once did an article for the Sun newspaper. I stayed in Britain's worst hotels for a feature.
Great assignment.
Yeah. And I tell you, I went to bed, I went out into town, I bought a sheet and I pulled it around my neck, and I was so scared about going to sleep because of the state of the mattress.
Yeah, and
I felt like wearing a body condom or something.
What is interesting is that they're prevalent at the moment in Paris, and nobody quite knows whether they'll be able to clear up the problem by the time of the Olympics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
where everybody's going to go and stay in hotels.
And the French are terribly worried that the more publicity this gets, people won't want to go over there on holiday or anything like that. And at the moment, you'd be thinking, maybe not. Let's try and get somewhere else like Rome or something.
Well, if you've been chased by a crowd of bedbugs, it might make the Olympic run a bit faster.
And of course, then you always wonder: are we in the media, the press, playing it up to the level of just trying to frighten everybody?
Yeah.
What do you think?
The media never does that.
No, I mean, I think it's worth always being aware of these things. But when you see pictures in newspapers of these bugs and you see the size of them, like the footage that we've just seen, I do wonder if we are perhaps taking it out of proportion. But I do think people need to be aware of this. But it just makes me laugh that we shouldn't blame the French. But, naturally...
We'll be checking our bed when we get home.
And if you're listening on the radio, you don't know how lucky you are, because you can't see these pictures.
You don't want to see them, really.
Of bedbugs scuttling around on trains, waiting to jump onto your shoulders.
I think we've just got to keep a sense of proportion, or we're just going to frighten ourselves to death.
Yeah,
don't you think? OK, thank you very much for the moment, Nigel and Claire. Let's find out about this all-important weather.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Certainly a different feeling day for those in the north to those in the south. High pressure is pushing in from continental Europe, importing heat for southern areas, but this trailing frontal system is going to be providing very heavy and persistent rain across much of Scotland throughout the day. There is an amber weather warning in force, with flooding and disruption to transport likely in places, the potential for a month's worth of rainfall to fall in some locations. It may even lead to some shallow landslides, so do take care. For Northern Ireland, Wales and England, a largely dry day, some hazy sunshine around at times, temperatures climbing towards 23 degrees Celsius in the southeast, where we'd normally be around 16 degrees at this time of the year. The rain will continue, though, across Scotland as we head overnight. Again, some heavy pulses around at times. Other areas generally staying dry, but we'll start to see some cloud push into eastern areas of England overnight, turning a little bit murkier here. Most of us, though, seeing temperatures hold up around 12 to 13 degrees Celsius, so a fairly mild start to Sunday. The rain across Scotland will gradually push its way northwards during the day on Sunday. Still some heavy pulses for Aberdeenshire, the Highlands to begin with, and then eventually into the Northern Isles later on. The cloud in the east will be a bit stubborn to clear throughout the morning, but into the afternoon some brighter spells should develop, but it will be Wales, southwest England that sees the best of the sunshine on Sunday. Temperatures, though, again climbing towards 25 degrees Celsius in parts of London. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Jonathan, thanks very much indeed. Good news for some. Very, very wet weather for Scotland, particularly, and the north of England. But we are going to have an October heat wave for quite a few days. So if you're in an area where we should get some sun, what are you going to be doing today that you weren't planning on doing in October? We'd love to hear from you. As ever, gbviews@gbnews.com.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Saturday, the 7th of October. Today, have you noticed that it's turned much warmer recently? Apparently, we're experiencing an unusual blast of warm October weather. They're calling it a heat wave, but how long will it last?
And after the Labour Party heralded yesterday's success in the by-election in Scotland as seismic, today we are asking, is there still a chance for Scottish independence?
There's bigger issues to sort out than independence.
I think it's dead. We've not heard much about it now. It used to be all over the news, but you don't hear it now.
And looking back at other amazing things that have happened this week, we'll look at Suella Braverman's speech on immigration during the Tory party conference.
And of course, Jonathan has that all-important weather.
Some of us will be seeing some very warm sunshine today. For others, though, there's heavy, persistent rainfall in the forecast. So do join me later for all the details of what you can expect.
We'll be trying to make some sense of this apparent October heatwave. Good morning, it's nice to be with you. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Gosh. Ian, Cal and Reggie, good morning. They say, our day consists of breakfast in bed, bacon and mushroom sandwich, waiting for it to get light, then out in the garden to get it tidy and ready for my favourite Finn's Bar to open this afternoon.
So I looked at what a Finn's Bar is, for those who don't know. It's an independent restaurant chain, views overlooking the sea, with lovely kind of gullies and troughs over the beach. I'm getting lifestyle envy.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But we may have a chance to get out the barbecues today and maybe for the next few days, depending on where you live, really. Mm-hmm. Andy says, I remember back in October 2011, the first week was roasting. I was sunbathing in the back garden and I had to start a new job that week and my first day was sweltering.
And let's not gloat too much about the great weather, because of course it's not great for everybody. And Carol says this: we've had a dreadful wet week where I live in North Yorkshire. Miserable, soggy dog walks. Very envious watching your wonderful sunshine
well, we'll
down
find out.
south.
We'll find out in a minute if the sun might get it anywhere near North Yorkshire. Melissa is in Spain. She's in Almeria. She says, it's still 32 degrees today, so we're going to be going in the pool.
It's a fantastic part of the world down there in Almeria. Beautiful.
As long as you've got a pool nearby. OK, so let's talk about this apparent heat wave, because you can sort of put the brakes on winter at the moment. We're not there yet. We're going to enjoy, apparently, temperatures of something like 22 degrees for the next 5 days.
Fantastic. Temperatures today could reach 25 degrees and up to 27 degrees tomorrow on Sunday, making it unseasonably and unusually warm for an October.
Yeah, well, let's make some sense of it then and see what's happening all around the country. Weather journalist Nathan Rao joins us. Hello, Nathan.
Hello, good
morning. And like I said, I think we probably ought to start with the north.
Yes.
Because they're going to be deluged with rain, aren't they?
Absolutely. There is a Met Office. There are 2 Met Office warnings out in place across pretty much the whole of Scotland today, and that is for up to 7 inches of rain in the worst hit regions. There's an amber warning in that region and a yellow warning more widely. This is because that's where the jet stream is sitting at the moment, and that's where the contrast between the cold and the warm areas, and that's where you're going to get this sort of battleground causing the intense deluges. So one to watch out for out there. Possible damage to buildings, travel disruptions, certainly.
Yeah, they're warning that trains will probably have to be halted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some very, very intense downpours in a short period of time up there, so one to watch out for, and very, very different from the rest of the country, which is going to be enjoying summer's return, and we can call it an Indian summer.
OK, so just to address Carol, who's up in North Yorkshire, is there any chance she's going to get sunshine?
Yes, Carol can look forward to some sunshine, because this hot weather, the high pressure that's causing this is going right across the country, so the south is going to get the warmest of the temperatures. This always happens when we get warm air coming up from the south, but really all of the UK is going to be warm, apart from Scotland and the very north, over the next 2 days. 27 degrees possibly the highest temperature we'll get tomorrow, which is very unusual, because the average for this time of year is about 10 degrees.
Well, of course, the big question will be how unusual is it? Andy says he remembers in October 2011 it was just like this. But, of course, when the weather's like this these days, everyone goes, oh, my God, you know, it's climate change, the end of the world is nigh.
Yeah.
How unusual is this? And is it something we should be concerned about or something we should just enjoy?
Right. Now, Andy is right, because in 2011, on the 1st of October, we got 29.9 degrees, and that was the record. Now, in terms of why we're getting this, and is this something we should be worried about, and is this something we're going to see more of, and then we start very carefully tiptoeing around this discussion of climate change. We're certainly seeing more and more unusual weather events, but I'm always very, very firm on that we have to separate these issues of weather and climate. Now, climate is an average of weather events taken over a period of time, and weather is an observation of things which happen immediately, changes in wind direction, temperature, pressure, all that sort of thing. And I think you've got to separate the two, because this is where the hysteria comes. Now, the climate is certainly changing, and there is a link to say that the probability of unusual or extreme events, weather events, increases with the changing climate. So there is a link there, but I think it is wrong, and I think it's unscientific to look at every single unusual weather event or extreme weather event, be it heat waves, and go, that's climate change. It's not. It may have been made more probable by climate change, but I think to keep this discussion sensible and scientific, we need to keep that distinction and keep it balanced. So, yes, these things could become more probable as we look at climate change going forward, but then again, they might not happen.
You can't get away from the fact, though, that we seem to be breaking records all the time with our temperatures.
And even this year, I mean, we had the hottest June on record. We've had the beginning of September, we saw 30 degrees for 7 days in a row, which was a record. We've had the hottest September, the joint hottest September on record.
We had a miserable July.
We had a very miserable July, yes, that was miserable. But overall, we seem to be looking at records, and not just in the UK, but if you remember a couple of months ago, we were talking about the Cerberus heat wave in Europe, which was absolutely astonishing.
One thing...
Oh, sorry, I was just wondering if the way we're getting our temperatures is changing, in that I just remember, and I don't know whether it's just because, you know, I'm looking back through rose-coloured specs, but I seem to remember that July and August, my mum and dad used to take us down to Torquay or something on the south coast, and you knew you were going to get a week or two of really good baking weather. And now we get the high temperatures, but we only get them in short spurts.
Yes.
And then it's horrible again.
Yes.
And then maybe you come along a bit later and you say, all right, we'll do another 5 days of good weather. it's not like it used to be.
It isn't, and actually this is a very interesting discussion, because not only is the summer not like it used to be, but the winter as well. I mean, it's now the beginning of October, and I always remember when I was at school wrapping up for October and bonfire night and being freezing cold, and you'd always get snow in December. And now December is pretty much, we're looking at temperatures every year around 15 degrees. You know, we're always looking for this white Christmas. And I cover this stuff every year, and every Christmas I'm looking at it as well. And we're recording temperatures in the teens, and it's all very unusual. And then we get the snow later on in January. So there is a definite change going on. You know, no one can deny that the weather is changing. Now, the discussion is whether that's a climate change man-made thing or whether it's a cyclical thing.
OK, Nathan, one thing I always love is the fact somewhere like Bognor Regis is going to be warmer than Barcelona. Yes. Where will Britain beat this weekend?
Britain is going to be... Well, we've got to remember that Europe is very hot, but there are some places. Barcelona, 26. So if we get that 27 tomorrow, then we'll beat Barcelona. And Istanbul, 25. Pretty grim compared to our 27 tomorrow, so that's looking not quite so good. But yeah, parts of Europe, we could be well up there. So head to Bognor Regis.
Sweet as a nut. Thank you,
Get the Barbie out, get the paddling pool out, maybe. It's still time to be able to do that. And if you're like me, you sort of look back and think summers used to be different when I was a kid. You know, and your mum and dad taught you how to swim in the sea. My dad taught us how to swim with one of those big inner tubes from a car tyre. Oh, they were good fun.
They were brilliant.
And that was in places like Torquay on the south coast. And I don't know, were summers different in the olden days?
And winters. I used to love the deep, crisp snow. You could set your watch by it. Every year you make massive snowmen, and it was like a fantastic thing to look forward to.
And I grew up in the Midlands, and the chances of a white Christmas were pretty high.
Yeah.
In and around Birmingham, the West Midlands, you could get a white Christmas. Now you never see one.
Now the odds are usually against a white Christmas than for a white Christmas, because it's becoming so unusual to see that even further north. I mean, as I said, I look at this every year, and I can't remember if we got white Christmas last year. It snowed a bit earlier, actually. I was in here and it was snowing in the beginning, but I think actually it turned mild again. So we're looking at milder Christmases more. But it's interesting, you're more likely to get a white Easter than you are to get a white Christmas.
That's true, yes. We've had two of those, haven't we? Yeah. Well, let us know what your thoughts are about what holidays used to be like when you were young. Maybe you've got a picture. Love to see them. Or any pictures that you've been taking over the last couple of days when suddenly the sun has come out. My hot lips... My salvia hot lips. I was given some cuttings. It's a gorgeous plant, but the flower looks like a pout, right? I'm showing you a picture there so you can tell.
It does indeed look like a pout.
And I planted them all along a border, and they've been very sort of scraungy and not doing anything. They're suddenly tall, out, absolutely enjoying the sunshine at the moment. So if you've got any nice gardening pictures too, I love to have pictures on a Saturday and a Sunday. Maybe you could take some this afternoon for us tomorrow. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Probably your hot lips don't know what season it is.
They don't know, but they're pouting to the sun.
OK, moving on now to a bit of politics, because the Scottish Labour leader, Anna Sarwar, has said that Scottish politics has fundamentally changed after Labour overwhelmingly won Scotland's first recall by-election. Labour candidate Michael Shanks won the Rutherglen and Hamilton West seat after securing more than twice the votes of his SNP rival, Katie Loudon.
The result, of course, is going to pile more pressure on the SNP leader and Scottish First Minister, of course, Humza Yousaf, who has seen his party's fortunes decline in the polls in the wake of the ongoing police investigation, of course, into various SNP problems.
Our reporter Tamsin Roberts takes a look back at the background of Labour's newest Scottish MP, Michael Shanks.
Meet Labour's newest Scottish MP, Michael Shanks, who won more than 50% of the vote to take the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election, putting a smile on his boss's face, who hope it's a sign of things to come at the general election.
I've been determined from the moment I took over as leader of the Labour Party to take us from one of the worst defeats since the 1930s for us to a general election victory, and that's why we've worked so hard to change the Labour Party. I've always said the route to that general election runs through Scotland, and that is because I know how strongly so many people in Scotland want change.
It feels incredible to represent the community that I live in, the community that I love, but also I do feel the responsibility of thousands of people that have put trust in me.
This is an absolutely extraordinary result, a seismic result, and I think this will send shockwaves through the SNP.
But what else do we know about the 35-year-old teacher turned politician? Well, he's previously hit the headlines away from the world of politics for running all of Glasgow's 6,000 streets. He took on this incredible challenge at the beginning of the first COVID lockdown as a way of making the most of his daily exercise. But does he have any experience of politics? Well, kind of. He's unsuccessfully stood for election before, 3 times between 2012 and 2017. He also quit the Labour Party on the day of the 2019 general election in protest at the party's stance on Brexit. And he continues to have different opinions to the Labour leader, particularly, it seems, over a potential plan to re-engage, if not rejoin, the European Union. Tamsin Roberts, GB News.
Well, earlier on, our reporter Tony Maguire spoke to some of the local people and asked them if they think there is still any chance for Scottish independence.
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
And why is that?
They're no good. They're no good.
I hope it's dead. Fingers crossed.
I think there's bigger issues to sort out than independence.
I think it's dead. We've not heard much about it now. It used to be all over the news, but you don't hear it now.
Hopefully it would be, we would go to independence.
I don't support independence, so I voted for the Labour candidate.
OK, well, today we're debating, is Scottish independence dead in the water? Joining us to talk about this is the political editor at the Daily Mail, Michael Blackley, and Scottish political advisor Dan McCroskey. Good morning to you, gentlemen. Michael, let's start with you. Not a surprising result. Labour expected to do well, but is this a bellwether, do you think, of the way that the movement is going to go north of the border towards Labour? And with that in mind, is the dream of Scottish independence withering on the vine?
Well, Labour are certainly keen to talk about this being a seismic election victory, and it's given them a lot of hope that they can win seats in many parts of Scotland. However, I would point out just on that the Conservatives are also hopeful of winning seats from the SNP. So I don't think we can assume that it's going to be one-way traffic from just the SNP to Labour. In terms of the push for independence, I think it's going absolutely nowhere at all. The SNP are still going to be talking a lot about independence. You're going to hear that at their conference next weekend, where they're talking up their independence strategy, but there's absolutely no chance that there's going to be an independence referendum if the SNP are engulfed in the kind of crisis that they are dealing with at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Dan, certainly until the result from the other night, the SNP were always talking about the idea of pushing for another referendum. That's never going to happen now, is it?
I mean, it's very difficult to see how that might happen. I mean, of course, there's the SNP government in Scotland have had very mixed messages about this issue. On one hand, they've suggested that if they won a majority of seats at the next general election, then that would result in a mandate. But then on the flip side, they've said it would be over 50% of the vote. And on that by-election result, it's highly unlikely to see them doing either of those things. So a general election, if that result is played out across the board, that 20% swing, the SNP would go back to its pre-2015 number of 6 MPs. And that pretty much kills the argument stone dead.
Michael, how much of the result in this by-election do you think is a consequence of the scandal that's engulfed the party with the arrest of Nicola Sturgeon and her husband, and also the fact that Humza Yousaf, for all of his Time magazine appearances, is not really seen as a natural successor with the same gravitas as your Sturgeons?
Yes, I think all of that has certainly been a factor. Humza Yousaf yesterday had started out by saying that the buck stops with him, but he then did blame pretty much everything else for causing the result yesterday. So he talked about the police investigation, which unquestionably was a factor. You know, the SNP have had weeks and weeks and weeks of terrible publicity for what's going on in their party, and it's caused deep divisions and splits within their elected members, and clearly that's going to have an impact on voters. There were also, of course, other factors like the COVID scandal MP Margaret Ferrier, what caused that by-election in the first place. There was a backlash from voters against her, and it's not surprising that the SNP would take some of the pain from that. So a variety of factors, but Hamza Yusuf has really been struggling to get his authority over his party at the moment, and I think he's maybe been trying to please everyone in his party and ended up pleasing no one with the current strategy.
And finally then, Dan, just to you, I mean, clearly the Conservatives were very disappointed to have to lose their deposit. Will they do better in other seats, do you think, in a general election?
Yeah, I think that will be the case. Obviously, this has always been a difficult seat for the Conservatives to make the argument to vote for us. It was portrayed by the Scottish media as a two-horse race between the SNP and Labour, and I think there's a lot of pro-UK voters who are so sick to death of the SNP that there were definitely some tactical movement, shall we say, and I think that was certainly the case from our voters. But looking to the next general election, the Scottish Conservatives have a number of target seats. Many are in rural Scotland, where the party have traditionally done well in, especially at the last two general elections. So I think there'll be a real focus on a lot of those constituencies, and you'll probably see that play out in the messaging from the party over the next year.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you, Michael Blackley and Dan McCroskey, for that update on Scottish independence. Thanks for joining us on GB News Breakfast.
Yeah, and if you're listening or watching from your home in Scotland at the moment, tell us what you think. Do you think Scottish independence is dead? You're glad to see that happen? Or is it a dream that's probably not going to come true for you? GB Views at gbnews.com. Keep your views coming in.
OK, let's have a look now at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning. And the UK is on course to see its biggest tax rise in at least 50 years as a result of the freeze on personal thresholds and soaring inflation. According to new analysis by the Resolution Foundation, taxpayers are set to hand over £40 billion a year by 2028, up from a forecast £30 billion at the same time of Chancellor Jeremy Hunt's budget in March. It comes as Mr Hunt ruled out sizable tax cuts this year amid Tory calls for a pre-election giveaway at the Conservative Party conference in Manchester.
Now, northern and southern parts of the UK are going to continue to see a contrast in the weather this weekend. High temperatures and torrential rainfall affecting different areas. The Met Office have issued both amber and yellow rain warnings for large parts of Scotland and northern England through to tomorrow morning. And they're saying that train services in Scotland are expected to be disrupted, with some operators warning passengers not to travel at all.
And Rishi Sunak has said that he hopes tensions between Canada and India will de-escalate after a diplomatic row over the killing of a Sikh separatist leader. Last month, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said in Parliament there were credible allegations that India was involved in Hardeep Singh Nijjar's death. In retaliation to the comments, India told Canada that 41 of their diplomats would be removed from the country.
And let's go to Jonathan Vaughtry now for a look at today's weather.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Certainly a different feeling day for those in the north to those in the south. High pressure is pushing in from continental Europe, importing heat for southern areas, but this trailing frontal system is going to be providing very heavy and persistent rain across much of Scotland throughout the day. There is an amber weather warning in force, with flooding and disruption to transport likely in place. There's the potential for a month's worth of rainfall to fall in some locations. May even lead to some shallow landslides, so do take care. For Northern Ireland, Wales and England, a largely dry day, some hazy sunshine around at times, temperatures climbing towards 23 degrees Celsius in the southeast, where we'd normally be around 16 degrees at this time of the year. The rain will continue, though, across Scotland as we head overnight. Again, some heavy pulses around at times. Other areas generally staying dry, but we'll start to see some cloud push into eastern areas of England overnight, turning a little bit murkier here. Most of us, though, seeing temperatures hold up around 12 to 13 degrees Celsius, so a fairly mild start to Sunday. The rain across Scotland will gradually push its way northwards during the day on Sunday. Still some heavy pauses for Aberdeenshire, the Highlands to begin with, and then eventually into the Northern Isles later on. The cloud in the east will be a bit stubborn to clear throughout the morning, but into the afternoon some brighter spells should develop. But it will be Wales, southwest England that sees the best of the sunshine. On Sunday, temperatures though again climbing towards 25 degrees Celsius in parts of London. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, enjoy your day or watch out for what's going to be torrential rain. Coming up, we're going to be looking back on Suella Braverman's speech on immigration during the Tory party conference. You're watching Breakfast on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 25 minutes past 7. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin. A bit earlier, during our headline makers, we were talking about the male menopause or the menopause, as the front page of the Daily Mail is talking about, and whether it is a real thing and whether we should be calling it that.
Yeah.
Jan says, I'm in my 50s and I've been a therapist for over 30 years. The andropause, as the menopause is properly known, is nothing new.
So Jan is saying the menopause is real. Thank you, Jan. You're an actual
And
therapist.
it's recognised by NHS.
It's on the NHS website. The male menopause is in inverted commas because that's what it's referred to by the press. But yeah, the andropause describes an age-related reduction of testosterone in men. Signs include fatigue, insomnia, mood changes and more. It can also affect your fertility. So it is a real thing.
And it certainly is for a lot of women, isn't it? Sue in Lincolnshire says, I'm older now, but I suffered terribly with symptoms for over 20 years. But I never had time off. I would have felt so guilty.
Yeah.
However, the weather is grabbing you at the moment. Tim says he's planning to go sick off work. Sorry, Tim. Well, maybe it's just as well I don't know your surname or where you live. The weather is so good here, he says.
Interesting. John is saying this, and the forecast in the East Midlands is not for a heat wave today. Not even any sunshine is forecast. This is all fake, made-up news. Anne, over to you.
Well, it is not, because we've both been checking. If you look at the East Midlands Airport, which is, I mean, it's often usually airport websites that tell you what the weather. It is going to be baking hot today in the East Midlands. I mean, that would be Nottingham East Midlands Airport,
that's
wouldn't it?
correct.
But for that area, it's going to be baking hot today and tomorrow. Pretty hot Monday. Very hot Tuesday. 11th, you might get a little bit of rain, and then still hot on Thursday. So I don't know what you're looking at, but the weather forecast in the East Midlands is good.
Yeah, I'm going by the Met Office and I'm going by Anne Diamond. Sorry, John, I think we've called you out. Not fake news. Look out the window. It's going to be a corker.
Yeah, Danny says, while most people may be having barbecues and sunbathing today, I can report that I'm going to be cutting the grass before winter. Yes, that's got to be done in my garden too.
I've got to do that.
Meanwhile, Ian says, Ian, where do you live? We're going to go to the beach today to top up the tan. I don't blame you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Keep them coming in.
Right, time now for News Matters, where we look back on a Saturday at some of the biggest stories that have happened during the week.
Yeah, during the Conservative Party conference in Manchester, Home Secretary Suella Braverman shared her concern about immigration.
This is what she said.
One of the most powerful forces reshaping our world is unprecedented mass migration. The wind of change that carried my own parents across the globe in the 20th century was a mere gust compared to the hurricane that is coming. It is Labour that turbocharged their impact by passing the misnamed Human Rights Act. I'm surprised they didn't call it the Criminal Rights Act.
It was a very strong speech, but a lot of people might be worried about the phraseology and some of the words she used. Was it David Cameron who got in terrible trouble for talking about people swarming in?
That's right, and it's the word hurricane there in particular that's been seized upon. Loads to talk about in this debate, but let's look at a counterpoint that came in also earlier this week from Bana Alabad, who's one of the world's most famous and youngest refugee campaigners. She's from Syria and has been campaigning for better treatment of migrants, especially children. And this is what she said to us earlier this week on GB News.
No child deserves to be a refugee, and no child deserves to be under siege. And, you know, every child deserves to have the right to be educated and live in, like, a better future and in a safe place. Many people don't like refugees. They think that, you know, we come here because we want to, like, do nothing, but we are actually refugees. We come from a place that is horrible. When I was in Syria, we couldn't eat anything, so we were always so hungry and always sick. So when we come to a new country and we want help because we don't know the language and we don't know any of the traditions or cultures or anything.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's the first time I've seen that clip.
Yeah, very, very articulate,
Wow.
very, very passionate, you know, very heartfelt, you know, humane way of portraying that. In stark contrast to what a lot of people are saying Suella Braverman's take was, and that's the debate this week. Where are we sat on the great immigration debate? And joining us now is immigration lawyer Skylar McKeith. Good morning to you, Skylar. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. We have two very contrasting takes on this. Shall we start with Suella Braverman? She talked about the winds of change, and then her next phrase was perhaps poor, has turned into a hurricane, seized upon by her critics, of course, that a hurricane is a destructive force that rips Britain apart. What do you make of what she said?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely some harsh words. I do think some people are perhaps more sensitive nowadays, but it cannot be denied that immigration is at a high, with it only increasing. And so the government's efforts and focus, of course, should be on cracking down on unlawful immigration and certainly on the dangerous small boat crossings. The asylum system is a system that's not really working, and there's currently a large backlog of asylum claims that need to be processed. Over 135,000 people are waiting for a decision. It's costing the UK taxpayer billions of pounds a year and around £6 million a day. So it's definitely a major issue. And the government is actually restricting immigration across the board on both the legal side and the unlawful side. They're making it harder now to come to the UK legally for economic migration. They've increased visa application fees for economic migrants and also for spouses of British citizens. And they are also planning to stop students from bringing dependents on their visas. So we could see a knock-on effect of this, as many British universities rely heavily on international students as well.
You only have to look at the contrasting pictures that we're showing at the moment. Hearing Banner talk earlier, I mean, what a cogent, what a brilliant speaker she was. What a lovely-looking young woman who made her point so eloquently. And then, contrastingly, we see boatloads of what look like hooded young men. And you can understand people fearing one whilst also wanting to accept the other, can't you?
Exactly. When you see her talk so eloquently like that, it's difficult to hear at times. And asylum is when an individual is given protection by another country because they cannot return home because of war, violence, or persecution. And once the Home Office recognises that they are a refugee, then they will be able to work in the UK. And a refugee is an individual who cannot return home with the fear of death, violence, or persecution. And many of the people arriving to the public don't necessarily appear to be those types of individuals.
Fascinating, Skylar, how she said herself, Banner, she said that the people coming here illegally, in a sense, are taking the narrative, taking the sympathy away from people like herself, who, of course, deserve our support and our sanctuary. And it's worth pointing out that the concern with immigration isn't some minority extremist position. In fact, the majority of Brits now think immigration should be reduced. And the biggest score of all is 37% believe it should be reduced a lot. Suella Braverman, back to her, she knows this is going to be a central tenet, if not of this election, perhaps of her future leadership bid. And yet, we have a backdrop of a government that have completely failed to control our borders. So for all the tough talk in the world, we're still faced with borders that are very porous.
Absolutely. For a long time now, we've kept hearing they're going to sort out this issue, and it's not really been sorted yet. So we will see. At the end of the day, the burden of substantiating an asylum claim lies with the claimant. So, we'll see how this works out.
Yeah, and as we've been making the point during the day, I mean, it's happening all over the world, isn't it? Skylar, thanks very much indeed. Good to talk to you. So that was our look back at that big speech that happened earlier on in the week. Let's bring you right bang up to date, though, at 7:35. Let's go through some of the latest showbiz news, because there's a lot around. Stephanie Tetchy is with us.
Good morning,
Hello.
Anna Martin.
What we never thought we'd ever talk about is the axing of
Top Gear. It could be the end of the road for Top Gear. We know the nation, some of us, we love speed, and that's why Top Gear has become a TV institution for almost 46 years now.
God, is it that
46 years. Even Angela Rippon was once a presenter on Top Gear. But it's all changed since last December, when Freddie Flintoff suffered a horrific car crash. He was driving at 130 miles per hour in a roofless car. He didn't have a helmet on. He was left with broken ribs and facial injuries. It's only a past few days ago he came out and said it's been the most hardest time of his life. Since then, the production has been brought to a halt. It's been almost 12 months now. Production people who are working on it haven't worked, and there are now reports coming out saying that the BBC are set to exit. The BBC have come out and said a decision on the timing of future Top Gear shows will be made in due course with BBC content.
Do you think this is a case of the show was taking more and more risks? I mean, Richard Hammond had a crash. This was an open-top car, the vehicle in question.
Yeah, and no airbags.
It's no airbags, didn't have an appropriate
No
helmet.
airbags, no helmet.
No.
Yeah, no, I think he had a helmet on, but not a full-face helmet. And that's why, apparently, he suffered injuries that were so traumatising to the staff that witnessed it.
Yes, it was.
Some of them are still kind of receiving therapy for that. The show couldn't come back after that, could it?
Well, that's the problem, Martin, because you do not want a show on air that's producing casualties and potentially putting a presenter's life at risk. Luckily for Freddie Flintoff, he survived, and so did Richard Hammond. But who knows, next time someone might not. And the problem is you cannot then bring this series back and it's still doing dangerous stunts like this. But then you have to think about the viewers at home. They're not going to want a lightweight version of Top Gear. Yeah. And it has been a lot of arguments.
I mean, you could argue that after 46 years, they should actually be thinking
calling it a day.
But I mean, this isn't the first time these awful things have happened.
No.
You think of Noel Edmonds' Saturday Night Show, where somebody actually died. And sometimes they take too many risks, and obviously, I think the only thing to do is to take it off air. But it's a shame.
It is a shame because it is one of those heritage programmes that we do love the BBC for. Top Gear has
a money spinner.
It is. It's a worldwide franchise. It's gone worldwide. But I think, my personal opinion is since Jeremy Clarkson left and that team, it hasn't been the same.
I think a lot of people will be out there agreeing with that sentiment because in many ways they were the golden days, slightly politically incorrect, a bit rough at the edges, you know, a bit of banter.
That's what people liked about the show, and I think if you try to water it down, and we've seen since they've left, it's hard to recreate that magic.
Now, talking of sort of taking, well, not risks, but challenges, the BBC drama about Jimmy Savile is due to air, I think, during the week, isn't it?
It's on Monday. And
it's starring Steve Coogan, who I think is tremendous.
Amazing.
What, have you seen any of it?
I've seen, we've got a trailer which we're going to play now. You've never seen Steve Coogan like this, but he really does do the role justice. I hope you do have a trailer. Is it with sound?
I don't think there's sound, but obviously he's playing Jimmy Savile.
Yeah, and
it's a four-parter.
It's a four-parter, and it's going to be looking at the rise of Jimmy Savile as a British TV star, but also the abuse that followed. He was never brought to justice when he died in 2011. So this is going to be focusing on his victims.
Look at him.
The sexual abuse. He looks like him a lot.
Yeah, he's got like a prosthetic nose and the wig and the tracksuits. It is quite chilling. The big question, though, Steph, is are the BBC looking themselves in the mirror about their role in enabling this for so long, or is it just focusing on him as an individual? Do they take responsibility for their part in it?
If I'm being honest, they don't. They've swept it underneath the carpet because, as we know, Jimmy Savile, at the time of his death, Newsnight was working on an investigation that they wanted to air shortly after his death, but the BBC shelved it. And instead, what they did, they put a tribute show on for Jimmy Savile. It took for ITV to do an expose for it all to come out. So they are receiving a lot of criticism about this drama because they do not include that in, and it was a big thing. He was a BBC star and he managed to get away with this.
He died a hero.
He did.
I mean, for heaven's sake.
And even after he died...
He almost had a state funeral, didn't he?
He did.
But Steve Coogan says the point of the drama is that they're hoping that history won't repeat itself and that when victims talk about these kind of cases in the future, they will be listened to, because he said a lot of people at the time, they were of low status. So when they were trying to talk about the abuse Jimmy Savile was putting them through, people who knew, they weren't listened to.
Apparently, I think it's something like four of the real victims have come forward and allowed themselves to be identified.
And they're featured in the document and the drama, so it'll be quite interesting to see how it all comes along.
There's a really moving vignette I saw of one of the victims went to see the screening and watched herself in that screening. And actually, she said she found the experience quite cathartic. It helped her to sort of deal with what happened to her.
It'll be uncomfortable viewing, but I'll be watching it.
But still, there's a lot of questions that have been raised about the BBC and their part in this and whether they should have taken more ownership in this drama.
Fascinating stuff, Steph. Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Thanks.
Brilliant.
Okay.
You're coming back again.
I'm coming back
but
more.
She's got more to tell us too. Now, coming up, would you jump out of a plane? I've been offered the chance quite a few times and always said no.
Sign me up.
Yeah. Dorothy Redden from Chicago, though, did, and she is 104 years old. We're going to be discussing that and more in Headline Makers in just a couple of moments.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 7:45. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne Diamond and myself, Martin Daubney.
Is the weather different from how it was when you were a child?
Yes.
Or are you just looking back through rose-tinted glasses? Rona says, I'm 60 and I clearly remember hot weather during the October week school holidays, around 46 or 47 years ago.
Yeah, Howard is short and to the point. I'm Welsh and I'm 75 and I don't remember that many white Christmases. Maybe you'd had a few sherries in the morning.
Tony says, unfortunately, Anne, everything in this country, including the weather, was better years ago.
I do tend to agree with that.
Yes, I know, I sort of do, but I think that's just a sign of age.
Yes, it is.
OK,
Menopause.
let's bring you up to date then with what's going on in the world. After its victory in the Rutherglen by-election, the Eye reports of Labour's plan to solve the UK housing crisis by building new towns and taxing developers.
And that new homes plan by Labour, it's going to be unveiled at the conference in Liverpool this weekend, is also on the front of The Guardian.
Labour policies also make the top story in The Times, with the Shadow Health Secretary saying that the NHS must modernise or die.
It's that shorthand for they're going to partly privatise it. Moving on. Menopause madness. That's the headline on the front of the Mail, reporting that dozens of public bodies and universities have what it calls male menopause policies.
And then the death of the wife of former Manchester United football manager Sir Alex Ferguson is the lead story in The Star, and our commiserations to him hugely, I think.
Always called her his rock. Well, joining us to go through some of the day's headlines, back with us again is GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and former Conservative advisor Claire Purcell. Hello to you again, guys. Let's start with that menopause thing. I know we covered that in the last one because we had confirmation, didn't we? That it's a real thing. A therapist, here it is, Jan wrote in saying it is a real thing. It's called the andropause. So, Nigel, you were right. Let's move on to...
Oh, good, I'm so glad you said that. I don't think we can take any more of that at the moment, but it is there as a thing on the NHS website.
Yes.
However, Nigel, you've been looking to the front page lead of the Telegraph, where police have wrongly labelled hundreds of suspected rapists as women.
Yes. And this is from a Freedom of Information request. What the Telegraph discovered that over the last 4 years, 260 men who identify as women have been sent to the Crown Prosecution Service for alleged rape. Another 200 plus are non-binary, so they're just registered as unknown. And the tricky bit here is that you can only be convicted, you can only be a rapist in the law if you're a biological male.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because rape is
a man-on-woman thing.
It's the insertion. It's the act
well, it can be a man-on-man thing, but it's actually, yes.
Yeah.
But Martin's absolutely right. You have to be a biological man to be a rapist.
Yes.
So if these people are trying to get out of the charges by pretending to be women, that's obviously wrong.
Who's advising them to do this? Because there are so many. This isn't just coincidence, is it?
No, it was guidelines the police had. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, says that they ought to stop, but they haven't stopped yet.
So are police at some stage saying to alleged rapists, we're probably going to charge you with rape, but you need to know that you have the right to actually plead that you're not a man?
Well, they have to register the gender of the person.
Yeah.
So the answer I would have thought to get round this is that whatever your gender is on an official document, so whether it be a driving licence, a passport, or whatever, the police should use that gender. Otherwise, it would get so complicated.
Yeah. And this brings, Claire, into sharp focus the conversation around self-identification. Of course, we saw the case in Scotland of Isla Bryson, the male rapist, the biological man who became a woman to go into a woman's jail. A tactic, this report says, is becoming increasingly prevalent as a way of having a softer time in jail, but also opening up the ability for predatory biological men to go into women's safe spaces. And a lot of people campaign this is a law that should be changed.
And I think Suella Braverman is trying to do that, and she has told police forces that this needs to stop, that they cannot just take this sort of self-identification.
Yeah.
But the slightly a missed point of all of this is also it makes the crime statistics next to useless. Because if you're looking at it as to what crimes are being committed against who and where do you need to put your resources, then the figures are going to be skewed. The data is then going to be useless.
And justice hasn't been served.
Yeah. Absolutely, justice hasn't been served. And for all of those victims of rape, I think this is a real kick in the teeth to them, that their crimes are not taken seriously and people are going to get off, as you say, lightly.
Can I lift the mood, though? before we run out of time, about this amazing woman who's 104 years old and she has thrown herself out of an aeroplane, if you like. Claire, tell us about it.
This is a 104-year-old lady from Chicago, Dorothy Hoffner, and she has become the Guinness World Record holder for a tandem for a skydive. It was previously held by a 103-year-old.
Oh my goodness!
But I mean, when you look at the footage of this, I mean, this strapped to an instructor, this little old lady who had approached the aeroplane with a Zimmer frame, was helped up the steps, and then it's just free falling.
She's enjoying it.
Just enjoying every second of
For those
it.
who can't see it, she's smiling like a Cheshire cat.
And her grey hair is in the wind. I mean, and there they make a very, very good landing.
Very soft landing. I mean, for starters, I'd be terrified of doing anything like that. And secondly, at that age, I'd be concerned that you might cork it mid-air.
Well, and I wonder if her expert jumper with her was wondering about that.
I wouldn't have done that at 40, let alone at 104.
Oh, that's brilliant. We'll move on then, Nigel, to Boris Johnson and what he thinks of Rishi Sunak's balmy... Oh, no, sorry, that's what he thought of it.
That's what he thinks.
Of the smoking ban.
Yes,
the fact that you can, if you're one age, you can smoke yourself to death.
Yes.
But if you're born a day later, you're not allowed to smoke at all.
Exactly, yes. This was announced at the Tory party conference. So it's to increase the smoking age by 1 year every year until nobody can ever buy cigarettes. What Boris Johnson says is that this is completely balmy, shouldn't be telling people what to do. And it's true, it's very unconservative to go and do that, which is why it was interesting that Rishi Sunak did it, because the Conservatives are meant to believe in freedom of choice. However, as smoking is the biggest killer in this country, I do think it's probably a very sensible plan to actually introduce.
But there's also an argument, Claire, to make 10 billion quid per annum in tobacco tax. Smokers, in a way, pay as they go, if you're going to be brutal about it. And is it actually... I know that Rishi's very passionate about this topic. Is this like a legacy issue? Does he want to make his point? He thinks he might get the chop at the next election anyway, but he's making a stand. And Boris is rebelling against this. I think you've nailed it. It's not a very conservative thing to do, is it? To be a nanny state like this.
It isn't. And strangely, I now agree with Boris Johnson, which is very unusual ground for me to be on. And I think he's right. I mean, it is profoundly unconservative. It's also, how is it going to work in practice? Are you going to have the situation of a shopkeeper having to ID a 40-year-old and say, were you born on or before the 1st of January 2009, in which case you can't, and what's going to happen? Are the police going to go around and arrest a 41-year-old for buying a packet of cigarettes for a 40-year-old?
Well, you may not have to take it that far, but there's no doubt it will have an effect,
It will have an effect. And I think you're right to look at smoking, but I think that Rishi Sunak really needed to have addressed a slightly more complicated and larger, if you pardon the pun, problem, which is obesity for public health reasons. I think that is on the increase, whereas smoking in those age groups is actually on the decrease.
But, you know, I think obesity is much harder to fight than just stopping smoke.
It is, but then why shouldn't we put the money into looking at that and looking... It is a very complex area, but it would save so many more lives if we could work with those people.
Yeah, but they've tried everything, haven't they? They've tried putting different traffic lights on food. Nobody wants to know they still like the food they like, even though it's making them fat and unhealthy.
And there can't be a single smoker out there who doesn't know it's bad for them. I mean, everyone knows smoking is bad, but it's a choice. And should the Tory government be mandating against choice? Boris obviously thinks no, and so do you.
Yeah, I do. And I think for once he is absolutely spot on this.
And I'm with Rishi on this one.
I'm with Rishi on this one. We're delighted. I think why not? Give it a go, because nobody wants their child to take up smoking, do they really? Nobody really wants it. OK, thanks very much indeed for the moment. We've run out of time yet again, but we do want to find out about the weather.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry, here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Certainly a different feeling day for those in the north to those in the south. High pressure is pushing in from continental Europe, importing heat for southern areas, but this trailing frontal system is going to be providing very heavy and persistent rain across much of Scotland throughout the day. There is an amber weather warning in force, with flooding and disruption to transport likely in places. The potential for a month's worth of rainfall to fall in some locations. and may even lead to some shallow landslides, so do take care. For Northern Ireland, Wales and England, a largely dry day, some hazy sunshine around at times, temperatures climbing towards 23 degrees Celsius in the southeast, where we'd normally be around 16 degrees at this time of the year. The rain will continue, though, across Scotland as we head overnight. Again, some heavy pulses around at times. Other areas generally staying dry, but we'll start to see some cloud push into eastern areas of England overnight, turning a little bit murkier here. Most of us, though, seeing temperatures hold up around 12 to 13 degrees Celsius, so a fairly mild start to Sunday. The rain across Scotland will gradually push its way northwards during the day on Sunday. Still some heavy pulses for Aberdeenshire, the Highlands to begin with, and then eventually into the Northern Isles later on. The cloud in the east will be a bit stubborn to clear throughout the morning, but into the afternoon some brighter spells should develop, but it will be Wales, southwest England that sees the best of the sunshine on Sunday. Temperatures, though, again climbing towards 25 degrees Celsius in parts of London. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Oh yes, do enjoy your day. Gabby says, morning Gabby, I am going to be heading out to the Bluebell Railway today with my son for his birthday. This weather reminds me of the day he was born in 2008. It was so warm, people were coming to see me in hospital.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel. GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Saturday, the 7th of October already. Today, have you noticed that it's turned much warmer recently? Apparently, we're experiencing an October heatwave in the next few days.
And after the Labour Party heralded yesterday's success in the by-election in Scotland as seismic, today we're asking the big question, is there still a chance for Scottish independence?
There's bigger issues to sort out than independence.
I think it's dead. We've not heard much about it now. It used to be all over the news, but you don't hear it now.
Well, earlier this week, some first-time voters joined us to share their views on Rishi Sunak's speech at the Tory party conference. We're going to revisit some of their comments and ask how the young generation is likely to vote in the next election.
It'd be nice of them to actually get out and vote. Anyway, here is Jonathan with your all-important weather.
Some of us will be seeing some very warm sunshine today. For others, though, there's heavy, persistent rainfall in the forecast. So do join me later for all the details of what you can expect.
And do let us know how you're going to spend what should be a nice sunny afternoon for you, at least in some parts of the country. Lovely to be with you today. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
I was asking whether it's just sort of looking back through rose-tinted glasses, thinking that summers were longer and more reliable when you were young, when I was a kid. And Kevin says winters are getting later and later now. Maybe instead of resetting the clocks every year, we should reset the months. And then we would have winter when it should be.
Yeah, it's a good point, because before I had kids, I always used to go on holiday in September, because September,
Yes.
I think now, has become a much more reliable month.
Well, August is desperately unreliable.
And July this year was absolute pants.
Yeah.
It was
And
like
yet it didn't used to be that way, did it? So the changing nature of our weather is fascinating. We're going to be talking about that right now because, well, according to the experts, winter actually isn't here just yet, maybe not even autumn, because we're going to enjoy temperatures of at least 22 degrees for the next 5 days.
Marvellous. And temperatures today could reach 25 degrees and up to 27 degrees tomorrow on Sunday, making it unusually and unseasonably warm for an October.
Well, who is better to ask all about this than weather forecaster John Ketley, who joins us now. Lovely to see you, John. Lovely to see you. I don't know if you can hear us. Can you? We're double-checking the tech.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
He's been hit by a hurricane.
Yes, that's true. We'll go back to John a bit later on. But we are getting brilliant weather, at least in the south of the country, sort of Yorkshire downwards, but North Yorkshire upwards in Scotland particularly. Torrential rain, which could actually disrupt some of the train services. Shall we try and see if we can get through to John again now? Morning, John.
Good morning, Anne. Sorry about that.
Lovely. You had us on mute, clearly. So, John, can you explain what's happening with the weather at the moment and why, in the middle of October, we should be getting a heatwave?
Well, you know, large parts of Europe at the moment have been exceptionally hot for quite some time. It's been a really good late summer spell of weather covering much of central, southern parts of Europe in particular. The whole of the Mediterranean at the moment is really fantastic, and it's a good time to be taking advantage of the kids back at school and you've got the chance to go away. But we're getting a taste of that, really, if you want to say that. We can say that we've got some of that southern European heat coming further north. And it's not common, obviously, in October to get this sort of high temperature weather. But it's welcome all the same. It's keeping the energy bills down and all that sort of thing. But it's really because it's coming from southern Europe. We're seeing a wind direction change, and that's bringing the jet stream further north. But as you've already mentioned, Anne, it is terrible over Scotland, so we've got more heavy rain to come in the next 36 hours across Scotland and a real risk of further flooding and landslides to come there. It's awful.
And I wonder, John, well, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. The voice of my childhood. I'm a Nottingham lad myself. You're on my local radio. Great to speak to you, as ever. But I wonder how much of this we had this conversation about. Is it just great weather? Is it just warm? Or is it something else? Something more nefarious? Is it climate change?
I thought you weren't going to mention those two words. That's terrible, Martin. You know perfectly well. You know where I'm sitting on this, don't you? This is part and parcel of global warming. We've got warming atmosphere across the whole world at the moment, so we're going to get these higher temperatures coming in across the UK as well. It's part and parcel of that. It's not necessarily what you call climate change. I just hate that phrase. I mean, if it was climate change, wouldn't we have got 40 degrees again this year, just like we did last year? And aren't we always going to get the same sort of weather year on year, but exponentially worse or hotter or whatever? It's just not happening like that. As far as I'm concerned, this is Britain. We're in between 50 degrees and 60 degrees north. We've got much more influence from the weather coming from different directions, from the Arctic, from southern Europe, as we are at the moment, from the east, from the west, and all that heavy rain that sweeps in from the Atlantic from time to time. And so we are vulnerable to different sorts of weather in this country. It's always been like that. It was ever thus, and it's going to be that again. So, you know, keeping our feet on the ground, which I think we need to do. We've got a hot spell at the moment. It is fantastic. But from Wednesday onwards, everything's going to go belly up, you might say, pear-shaped. And we're going to be looking at wind, rain, flooding across many parts of the country. And that's going to continue for about 10 days. So extremely unsettled weather to come once we get past Wednesday. Some of that rain in Scotland coming our way, I'm afraid, from Wednesday.
Thanks so much for that. Talk about putting a damper on it.
No, not at all. It's all right.
I know, well, it's your job. But I was wondering why there is such a distinctive north-south divide when it comes to the weather in this country. We feel so rotten sitting here in London looking forward to a afternoon in the garden, when in Scotland it's going to be such a deluge that it's going to affect train services. Why is there such a distinct north-south divide?
Well, it is true, and it isn't always in the same place, obviously. At the moment, it is covering a large part of northern UK, and it's been that way for most of the week, actually. It's been raining heavily across northern England as well, and Northern Ireland. So it's not just Scotland, but it is actually moving further north. And the reason is, of course, that jet stream flexes its muscles. It's vacillating all the time. The jet stream dominates how our weather is going to behave. It depends on where the high pressure and the low pressure systems are going to develop. So the jet stream at the moment is sitting right across the northern half of the UK. It's always on the move. It can be zonal, or it can block. And that's what we get in the winter sometimes, or even in the summer as well. When the jet stream decides to block, it means to say that everything becomes concentrated on our part of the world. Nothing moves in from the east or from the west. And that's when we get these stubborn areas of either very cold and foggy weather, maybe in the winter, and in the summer, like last summer, of course, when we did get 40 degrees, everything became blocked and we just became part of much of southern Europe, really. We just became extremely hot. So the jet stream blocks our weather from the Atlantic, but that block is disappearing. The jet stream is going to move further south, as I say, from Wednesday. And so the floodgates are opening, literally.
So, John, a lot of people have been getting in touch with us at GB News this morning, talking about the weather historically, how it always seemed that we had crisp, cold winters with beautiful snow. I still remember that as a kid. In fact, I remember in the 70s...
Never mind.
And the Radio Times predicted there'd be another ice age.
I think John might have lost our sound again. We'll see if we can sort that out. But that's something that we were asking you about, is whether it's just my memory playing tricks on me, or whether, when I was a kid, the weather was much more reliable for longer. Your parents took you on holiday. I mean, you didn't used to go abroad that much. No. Your parents took you on holiday in a caravan somewhere bleak, but actually you knew you could rely on sunshine and a warm sea, I seem to remember, for several weeks on end. And where nowadays it seems that you only get good weather for a couple of days.
I wonder,
and then it all changes, just as John was saying it's going to do.
I wonder, though, Anne, if that's selective memory. And the reason I say that is because the human mind shields us from trauma. I remember many times in Skegness, huddled inside a caravan, hearing the pounding rain on the tin roof.
Well, yes, I do remember a couple of times like that. But then if you look back through your old family albums, there are so many pictures of us just playing in the sea and building sandcastles on what looked like a really lovely, hot, sunny beach. I don't know. Was the weather more reliable in the olden days? Actually, several people have got in touch and said, yeah, like a lot of things, it was better years ago.
Tend to agree. I think you're right, it's an age thing. But, yeah, beautiful, dependable winters. And it seems to me that summer was never ending. Maybe that's just a romantic,
it might just
wistful look back.
Anyway, do keep your ideas coming in, won't you? gbviews@gbnews.com. What you're going to do this afternoon, given that if you live in particularly the more southern areas, it's going to be sunny, it's going to be hot. What are you going to do this afternoon that you wouldn't have thought you were going to do on an October afternoon?
I think it's time for a shirt-off lawn mow, followed by a barbie and a couple of cold tins.
Take some pictures for us, because then we'll look through your pictures maybe tomorrow morning.
Of mine? What, me, my shirt off?
Well, no, not particularly you and your shirt off, but your garden, I was thinking.
All right, we'll do.
Mowing the lawn. With a knotted handkerchief on your head.
Yeah, exactly, old school. OK, let's have a look now at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom on GB News this morning. Well, the UK is on course to see its biggest tax rise in at least 50 years as a result of the freeze on personal thresholds and soaring inflation. According to new analysis by the Resolution Foundation, taxpayers are set to hand over £40 billion a year by 2028, and that's up from a forecast of £30 billion at the time of Jeremy Hunt's budget in March. It comes as Mr Hunt ruled out sizable tax cuts, of course, this year, amid Tory calls for pre-election giveaway at the Conservative Party conference. And northern and southern parts of the UK will continue to see a contrast in weather this weekend, as we've just been discussing, with high temperatures and torrential rainfall affecting different areas. The Met Office has issued both amber and yellow rain warnings for large parts of Scotland and northern England through to tomorrow morning. Train services in Scotland are expected to be disrupted, with some operators warning passengers not to bother travelling. Rishi Sunak has said he hopes tensions between Canada and India will de-escalate after a diplomatic row over the killing of a Sikh separatist leader. Last month, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said in Parliament that there were credible allegations that India was involved in that death. And in retaliation to the comments, India told Canada that 41 of their diplomats would be removed from the country. It's just coming up to 12 minutes past 8. And back to one of the big stories this morning, following Sir Keir Starmer's claim that Labour blew the doors off Thursday's Scottish by-election. Where does this leave now the SNP? Labour's Michael Shanks won 58.5% of the vote in the latest by-election in Scotland, with a larger-than-expected swing, a whopping 20.4%. It's indicating, though, that the SNP's dream of independence has died. Our reporter Tamsin Roberts takes a look at the background of Labour's newest Scottish MP, Michael Shanks.
Meet Labour's newest Scottish MP, Michael Shanks, who won more than 50% of the vote to take the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election, putting a smile on his boss's face, who hope it's a sign of things to come at the general election.
I've been determined from the moment I took over as leader of the Labour Party to take us from one of the worst defeats since the 1930s for us to a general election victory, and that's why we've worked so hard to change the Labour Party. I've always said the route to that general election runs through Scotland, and that is because I know how strongly so many people in Scotland want change.
It feels incredible to represent the community that I live in, the community that I love, but also I do feel the responsibility of thousands of people that have put trust in me.
This is an absolutely extraordinary result, a seismic result, and I think this will send shockwaves through the SNP.
But what else do we know about the 35-year-old teacher turned politician? Well, he's previously hit the headlines away from the world of politics for running all of Glasgow's 6,000 streets. He took on this incredible challenge at the beginning of the first COVID lockdown as a way of making the most of his daily exercise. But does he have any experience of politics? Well, kind of. He's unsuccessfully stood for election before, 3 times between 2012 and 2017. He also quit the Labour Party on the day of the 2019 general election in protest at the party's stance on Brexit. And he continues to have different opinions to the Labour leader, particularly, it seems, over a potential plan to re-engage, if not rejoin, the European Union. Tamsin Roberts, GB News.
And earlier, our reporter Tony Maguire spoke to some of the local people in that seat and asked them if they believe there is still a chance for Scottish independence.
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
And why is that?
They're no good. They're no good.
I hope it's dead. Fingers crossed.
I think there's bigger issues to sort out than independence.
I think it's dead. We've not heard much about it now. It used to be all over the news, but you don't hear it now.
Hopefully it would be, we would go to independence.
I don't support independence, so I voted for the Labour candidate.
It did all used to be all over the news, didn't it?
Yeah.
Actually, funnily enough, you've been in touch with your views, and they're very different. Billy says, us Scots still very much want independence, but what the English don't understand is the divide in this. It's not just through politics, but also very much through religion.
Yeah, and with more evidence of that divide, Jay has strong words, says the SNP has brought Scotland down to the status of a third world country.
John says independence died in 2014. Humza and co have proved to be hopeless at delivering across all areas that are devolved.
And Anne is saying the dream of Scottish independence wouldn't be a dream, but a nightmare.
And Keith says the SNP a complete disaster. They've done nothing to help or improve Scotland. As for independence, that will never happen. Wow, differing views.
Split right down the middle there. And joining us now is our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, to discuss this and more, and also a look forward to the Labour Party conference, which kicks off tomorrow. Tom, first of all, people very divided on the topic of independence, but on the streets of the constituency, people seem to think this is a dying dream. It's withering on the vine.
No doubt, and indeed we've seen with the actualisation of the Labour Party's polling in Scotland really what has been considered for some time. This was the first genuine large electoral test to test the lay of the land, the way that things are going. We've seen a lot of evidence in the polls that the Labour Party had been rising up, that support for the SNP had been falling down, and indeed support for separatism, independence, whatever you want to call it, had been drifting down. But now we've got a pretty clear indication that that is a reality and not just a mirage. If these results were to be reflected across the country, the SNP could lose dozens of seats, and that would really take the wind out of the sails of a movement that really has been stuttering ever since the scandal involving a missing £600,000 for independence funds, the arrest and then release of 3 senior figures within the SNP, including the former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, and of course all of the scandal that surrounds that. It's clear that the main party that has been pushing the independence line in Scotland has been having a big time of turmoil, and given that they are just about the leading, the primary, the overwhelming voice behind that movement, when the SNP does poorly, the independence movement does poorly.
Yeah, I mean, they always say, don't they, a week is a long time in politics. And already we're seeing politics change with probably, a year or maybe even less than a year till the general election. Now, just for the sake of people who are listening to you on the radio, you're standing outside what is obviously the location for the Reform Party conference. This is party conference season, and the Reform Party is going to be holding its conference there behind you, I think, today. Nigel Farage, of course, who was sort of one of the founder members, if not the founder of it, will be in with us a bit later on. One wonders, when he went down so well at the Tory party conference, whether, had he known he would be so popular with the Tories, whether he would have gone ahead with that conference today.
Well, it is interesting, of course. Nigel Farage, the honorary president of the Reform Party. He'll be speaking here a little bit later, and of course speaking to GB News as well. But he is a rock star wherever he tends to go. Although I have to say, in Manchester at that Conservative Party conference, he was showing a bit of leg to the party faithful, but not quite saying he would want to rejoin the Conservative Party. It was, of course, his first Conservative Party conference since the late 1980s. But here today, it's the Reform Party conference, and the Reform Party is a very interesting political party. Of course, the successor movement to the Brexit Party, but doesn't quite have the same name recognition that the Brexit Party has. And it's been bobbling along at around 8% in the polls. That's a definite rise from where it was around 6 months ago. But eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed a change in the party's logo just today. If I take a step back and look at the logo behind me, it says Reform UK, but underneath that logo now, it also says the words, the Brexit Party. And I'm told that if there are polls that are done, Reform UK polls substantially lower than a hypothetical Brexit Party party. And so adding the words, the Brexit Party, to the Reform UK logo might be a significant step in raising that name recognition and potentially driving a higher vote for this party than it otherwise would have.
Should have not bothered changing the name in the first place. But looking ahead to the Labour Party conference, of course, kicks off tomorrow in Liverpool. It's on the front page of a lot of today's newspapers. A social housing revolution. And Wes Streeting also talking of the NHS must adapt or die. Does he mean a part privatisation?
It's interesting. This is what Wes Streeting has been saying for quite some time. He's someone seen to be on the right of the Labour Party, hasn't been afraid, hasn't been squeamish about using the sort of Blairite idea of bringing in private capacity to the healthcare system, although still funded through taxation. And he has spoken before about using greater private provision and talking about ways in which the efficiency of the service could be increased, and frankly in ways that the Conservative Party is still squeamish about. So it will be interesting to see the detail there, because the watchword, I believe, for Liverpool over the next 4 or 5 days is detail. We've heard a lot from the Labour Party about how they have been talking about how poorly the government has been doing in their view, but we haven't heard much about the meat on the bones of their own policy positions. And to some extent, that's borne a lot of fruit electorally for the Labour Party. They've been able to sort of win by default, but clearly now they believe that with perhaps less than a year left to go until the next general election, it's time to put some real policy detail out there, not just on health, but specifically. Perhaps the biggest thing we will learn is about their amorphous housing policy. There seems to be a bit of a tension within the Labour Party between those who want to focus on social subsidised housing and those who want to focus on planning reform, building market rate housing to bring the overall housing crisis back under control. It'll be interesting to see whose vision wins out, or whether there'll be, as the I newspaper this morning indicates, a sort of hybrid where planning reform is delivered, lots of houses are built using the private sector, but they are taxed, and using that tax money, social housing is built too. It'll be interesting to see if that is borne out in reality.
Yes, it'll be very interesting to pick at the meat on the bones of that, if they give us that, and whether or not there's any prospect of council housing returning, do you think?
I think Tom.
No, I think we've lost.
Sorry, was that to me? Yes.
No, it was to you. Yes, sorry, Tom. Yeah, I was just wondering, whether I even dared mention that phrase, council housing. Do you think that could ever come back?
I don't think so. We've seen a rebranding of council housing into housing associations, into social housing, into various forms of subsidised housing. And I think that's what Angela Rayner has been talking about with The Guardian this morning. And I think it's more likely that we will see higher quotas for subsidised housing in developments and sort of dotted around rather than the large sort of council estates of old.
Tom Howard, thank you. We just didn't want the interview to end. It was so good we came back to you for more. Thanks for joining us on the show this morning. You'll be there live throughout the day at the Reform Party
Well, that's
conference,
right.
of course.
I mean, there is so much politics to talk about. But as we said, Nigel Farage will be coming into breakfast, in about an hour's time.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was just wondering, what would you like to ask him? GB Views at gbnews.com. Get in touch now. What would you like to put to Nigel Farage at the moment? Do you think he should go back into the Tory party fold? I mean, Rishi Sunak sort of said he wouldn't rule it out, didn't he?
That's right.
I think Nigel is saying, no, I don't think I'd go back in yet. But why stay with reform when he could be more influential inside the Tory fold?
Yeah.
There are so many questions to put to Nigel at the moment. What would you like to ask him? Keep those questions coming in.
This is it.
GBviews at gbnews.com. It's your chance to ask him a question almost directly.
Your chance to barrage the Farage. Get in touch.
Yes, absolutely. Right now, let's find out more about the weather.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Certainly a different feeling day for those in the north to those in the south. High pressure is pushing in from continental Europe, importing heat for southern areas, but this trailing frontal system is going to be providing very heavy and persistent rain across much of Scotland throughout the day. There is an amber weather warning in force with flooding and disruption to transport likely in places, the potential for a month's worth of rainfall to fall in some locations. May even lead to some shallow landslides, so do take care. For Northern Ireland, Wales and England, a largely dry day, some hazy sunshine around at times, temperatures climbing towards 23 degrees Celsius in the southeast, where we'd normally be around 16 degrees at this time of the year. The rain will continue though across Scotland as we head overnight. Again, some heavy pulses around at times. Other areas generally staying dry, but we'll start to see some cloud push into eastern areas of England overnight, turning a little bit murkier here. Most of us though seeing temperatures hold up around 12 to 13 degrees Celsius, so a fairly mild start to Sunday. The rain across Scotland will gradually push its way northwards during the day on Sunday. Still some heavy pulses for Aberdeenshire, the Highlands to begin with, and then eventually into the Northern Isles later on. The cloud in the east will be a bit stubborn to clear throughout the morning, but into the afternoon some brighter spells should develop, but it will be Wales, southwest England that sees the best of the sunshine on Sunday. Temperatures though again climbing towards 25 degrees Celsius in parts of London. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Right, do stick with us. Coming up, we're going to be taking a look back at what young voters had to say about Rishi Sunak's speech. You're watching Breakfast on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
It's just coming up to 8:30. Now, we're thinking of the weather.
Yeah.
And yet again, we're getting all sorts of crossed lines coming in. Marion says, I live in a village near Northampton, which is definitely in the Midlands. And our forecast for the next 2 days is cloudy, with temperatures only up to 22 degrees. Well, I have to say, I've just checked. And you're going up to, you're going up to 22 degrees, but it's absolute bright sunshine. It says in our BBC weather report.
It's been a fascinating morning, Anne, because even when we're saying there's going to be amazing weather in October, people say, no, there's not. You got it all wrong. Fake news.
Yeah, you've got to be more optimistic. David says, in Scotland, we don't get many heat waves. Today's forecast is for heavy rain. No surprises there. I'm sorry, that's what we've been saying all morning. Yeah, you're getting the worst of it.
And Dave in London, we've been talking a lot about, was the weather better or at least different or more defined when we were kids? We all think it was. Maybe it's collective amnesia. Dave in London says this: as I approach 60 years of age, I look back and we definitely had 4 distinct seasons with cold winters, warm and occasionally hot summers, and wet springs and autumns. Now we have permanent spring and autumn with 2 weeks of summer and 2 weeks of winter.
Yeah, if you're lucky. Yeah. Carol in Lincolnshire says, I believe at my age of 65, we have lived through the best this country has to offer, including the weather.
Oh, chin up, Carol. It's not as bad as that.
No, let's hope not. Anyway, it's great to be with you this morning. Let's be optimistic if we possibly can. Now, one of the stories we've discussed this week is young voters and what they're going to do, particularly first-time voters, obviously. With an election looming over us, next year will be the very first time young people may get to vote. How does this affect them and what is influencing them?
Yeah, and here's what some prospective voters had to say about Rishi Sunak's speech.
There was one section where he was sort of just going off on a little rant by himself.
This Conservative Party, the party that legislated for same-sex marriage and is investing record amounts in childcare, we know that what matters is that love cascades down the generations.
Love cascading down your family. That's just a really weird way, flowery way of saying something which that's another thing. I don't think he actually got to a point with that.
I think it was a bit cringe here and there. Like, some things he said, I feel like he was making statements where he felt like, oh, this is like a really good statement, but it wasn't giving that.
I think he tried quite hard to impress all the people in the conference.
Under us, no more rip-off degrees. Students don't spend enough time in the classroom. A quarter of our children leave education without the basic literacy and numeracy they need to fulfill their potential. And our students study too narrow a range of subjects.
Yeah, so that really annoys me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think GCSEs are really good because it teaches us how to study a broad range of subjects, and it gets us into a lot of different things which we might be interested in, and obviously things that we might not be interested in. But I think once you're at A-levels, it's a lot more personal, and that's actually your first steps towards university or an apprenticeship or something like that.
Everything I learned up until I was 16 in terms of maths is all I needed to know. I don't need any more numeracy skills. I'm happy with the skills I've got.
Those who teach key subjects in schools and for the first time in our further education colleges too will receive special bonuses of up to £30,000 tax-free over the first 5 years of their career.
You know, this whole bonus thing for teachers is incredible. I think teachers are like the best people ever, and I think they deserve all the money in the world. But I think if you're only offering that money to teachers that are teaching essential subjects, it will put teachers off from teaching the other more artistic subjects.
Patients should know when hospitals are talking about men or women. And we shouldn't get bullied into believing that people can be any sex they want to be. They can't. A man is a man and a woman is a woman. That's just common sense.
He's got sex and gender completely mixed up. With gender, it's your social identity. Let people express themselves however they feel like they want to be.
What this lacks is compassion.
Smoking places huge pressures on the NHS and costs our country £17 billion a year. We have a chance to cut cancer deaths by a quarter, significantly ease those pressures and protect our children, and we should take it.
He's right in saying, you know, we need to stop it, but like the cause of, you know, kids and stuff isn't cigarettes, it's definitely not cigarettes, it's vaping.
Especially around like a university campus, like you'll go just around and see everyone just having a vape instead of cigarettes now.
Smoking has been a very big problem in the past, but it's not that prevalent anymore.
I mean, the marketing for it as well is ridiculous. They come out with new flavours like unicorn shake and vapes that look like ice creams, and it's blatantly made for teenagers.
So do you still vape a lot then?
100%, yeah.
But in the long term, I think it is a good thing that we're phasing out smoking and that...
Yeah, he has the right idea. I'm not really sure raising the age gap would be...
What would you say is a better solution then?
No idea. That's for them to figure out and not for me.
I don't know about you, but I was really impressed with them.
Yeah.
I really was. I hope they're excited at the prospect of the first time they're going to be able to vote, because they're obviously really thinking it through. I tell you what, there's another report, talking about vaping, there's a report in papers today saying that some young people in secondary schools are really stressed out at the idea of not being able to vape in school because they don't feel they can get through a lesson without vaping.
Absurd. Get used to it. Get used to self-control and weaning yourself off that stuff. That's life.
You heard it here. Right, let's talk to the Chief Executive Officer and founder of the Youth Vote UK, Alexander Cairns, who's here with us now. And you've been doing some polling amongst the people that you are talking to as well. What are the matters that are, you know, that matter to them most?
Morning, both. Yeah, so when we've been talking to young people recently, we've been finding that actually they want to talk about housing and renting prices going up. You know, we found that actually when asked what was the most important issues for you, 70% of young people said that they're really worried about mortgage prices, they're worried about their rent prices going up. It was kind of closely followed by 15% that said utility bills, food bills, just general like cost of living. So I think those are the main things that they're concerned about,
Yeah, I suppose that's what they also hear their parents are getting very, very upset about. But you also asked them about this idea of being forced to do English and maths to 18. What do they think of that?
Yeah, not keen. So I think when we polled them, 60% said they're really not happy about scrapping traditional A-levels and, you know, the kind of mandatory English and maths. I think we find that a lot of young people make up their mind quite early on. If they're good at English and maths, I think a lot of them find that at GCSE level, they get to I suppose, a standard where they think it's enough for them, and then they go on.
You also think it's all over, don't you? Think, oh, I can give it up.
Well, no, exactly. And actually, I found in my working career, and I think a lot of other young people find that actually, if you can get to a GCSE, say a C or B grade of English and maths, the A levels of English and maths are a lot more detailed and advanced, go into a lot more detail. And actually, I don't think it's needed. Actually, find that most people, when going into an interview, as long as they've got a C in GCSE English and maths, I think it's fine. And actually, I think Rishi Sunak's background of being in banking, he's very keen to get people to a really advanced standard in maths. But a lot of young people might go into a different profession, and I don't think you can force them to do English and maths until 19. A lot of people are not keen on that.
Now, Alex, the kids want to vape more, they want to do less work. Couldn't be shocked. But one thing that older people are exasperated about younger voters is this kind of, I guess the word is woke. So they found it very cringeworthy, the difference between gender and sex, which to us is quite clear. You know, you're a man or a woman. As Rishi said, that went down very badly. That's my first point. The second one is, if they're so concerned about getting on the housing ladder, why are they also typically quite accepting of the idea of uncontrolled immigration and open borders, which in itself directly impacts their ability to be able to get a house due to over demand? So what is the kind of political correctness of youth getting in the way of their actual life expectations, is what I'm saying?
No, I don't think so. I think young people are just more empathetic, maybe, when it comes to immigration than potentially their older counterparts. I think young people look at their area. I mean, London's a good example. They see a lot of developments going up, you know, foreign buyers coming in, buying lots of those properties. I don't think they see any immigrants coming into, you know, I live in southwest London. You don't see any immigrants buying £500,000 two beds in Richmond and Twickenham. I think a lot of young people are frustrated that there are private developers buying lots of land that are building homes that aren't affordable for them. So absolutely, absolutely. You know, they are frustrated because the government, there was nothing Rishi Sunak's speech at all about helping young people get onto the housing ladder. And the Help to Buy scheme, a lot of people don't look at the detail. The Help to Buy scheme actually gets them into a lot of debt because, you know, even though you only have to have, say, a 5% deposit, once the rest of the mortgage, it comes with extra costs, extra interest rates. So actually, it's not about political correctness. I think they're just really frustrated.
So very, very quickly, are they more likely to vote Labour?
Well, this is what's interesting, actually. We found that 34% of them are still unsure how they're going to vote. And that's a big problem for Labour. I think Labour needs to be a lot more detailed. I think the strategy, which I don't think is going to work long-term, is Keir Starmer's been sitting back, letting the Tory party implode. Fine in the short term, but longer term, young people want to know what their stance is on HS2, what their stance is on tuition fees, housing. So Labour needs to be detailed and not just take the young people's vote for granted.
Alex Cairns, superb. Thank you, Jonas. Of course, the huge challenge is getting young people to go and vote in the first place. It's great to see them politically engaged, but they moan about old people's hijacking the country, but they're the least likely to go out and get voted.
Well, not if Keir Starmer says the right things to them.
Well, let's see.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
OK, now it's time to go through the sports stories. Here is Chris Scudder. And, of course, the big story today is the Rugby World Cup. Scuds, what we got?
Morning, both. Yeah, who's going through to the quarterfinals of the Rugby World Cup? England, we know, are going through. Wales are going through. A big one today for Scotland and Ireland, because one of those probably will not be. We're going to get some views of players who have been there and done it. But, yeah, it's crunch time for the World Cup now as we really get to the serious part of the tournament. Jordan Murphy, I think we've got from Ireland, who play the Scots today. Scotland, it's basically knockout rugby. Is Jordan there? No Jordan at the moment.
OK. Not at the moment.
OK, we've got Di Llewellyn from Wales and Tom Varndell, former England wing as well. I mean, the pressure's off for both England and Wales, really. Let's start with Tom. England's going into the tournament with a lot of pressure, really, because it was awful, but things have really turned round, haven't they, Tom? However, going into the final game against Samoa today in Lille with interesting selections. George Ford at 10 at fly half and Owen Farrell, who a lot of people think is very crucial to England, coming in the centre. What do you make of that? Is it? I mean, they're not sure of a settled lineup at the moment, are they?
I wouldn't say they're not sure. I mean, Farrell, obviously, he had to serve a bit of a ban. And having him back in the team, he's a leader. It's great for England. And just getting that combination with him and Ford is really important.
Yeah, I mean, do you think... A lot of people think that with George Ford doing a lot of kicking, that it's going to be ugly stuff from England from here. Because we saw what happened against Chile. They scored, 11 tries. They had young Henry Arundel on the wing scoring 5. They had Marcus Smith at full-back, and everyone was going, great, England are going to open up now. But it doesn't look as though that's going to happen from here on in, does it?
Look, I can't see it being that expansive game going forward into the knockout stages. Look, the important thing is England keep winning. You know, if they can add a bit more of that excitement in their play, that'd be fantastic. I think today the game will open up, and I think we will see a different side of England. But when it gets to the quarterfinals, semi-finals, hopefully final, England might tighten up, and it's about winning those games.
Yeah, just looking at the pictures of France, who beat Italy, thrashed Italy last night. I mean, the curious thing for both you, Di and Tom, I mean, England and Wales are well out of harm's way in so much as France, South Africa, New Zealand and Ireland are all on the other side of the draw until the semi-finals. Which is great for England and Wales with their quarter-finals to come. We don't know who's playing who yet. We'll find out this weekend. Di Llewellyn, Wales-Georgia. Georgia did a bit of damage to Wales, 13-12. Was that last year? A couple of years ago, but that's not going to be repeated this weekend, is it?
First of all, good morning, guys. Bonadar. Yes, they did, which is very disappointing, but it was a different coaching setup there. They brought Warren Gatland back in, and he brought his own team back in. And over the last 6 months, they've generated high fitness levels again, great mental toughness. And they're looking sharp and they're peaking.
Yeah, I mean, like England, came in with low expectations, really. But it has been easier, isn't it? With all due respect, England and Wales have had it fairly easy. Who would you rather play in the next round? Because, I mean, Fiji have been the sort of X factor in this group, haven't they? And they look as though they could do some damage to the traditional countries. Who would you like to play next?
Well, a quarter-final, I don't think it matters really. They're massive games, you know. So, and like the gentleman just said then, you know, they won't be really open attacking rugby. Those close games without a great tactical awareness. You have to have a great kicking game. And like every game is one up front. You know, good scrum, good line-out, good set piece, and then you can play off that.
OK, just go back to Tom quickly. How far can England go? I mean, people expecting, you know, minimum semi-finals, really. Any further than that, you think?
Look, it's the World Cup, and in the World Cup, so much can, you know, there's so many different things that can happen. England have had a great group stage. They've really, really built, and their performance has got better and better. But I would love to see England get to the semi-final, and I think that's definitely possible.
Yeah, could be a quarter-final against Fiji. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the day today. It could be both four wins and no losses for both clubs, for both teams after the group stage. Thanks for joining us this morning. Just to say, guys, that Scotland-Ireland is effectively knockout rugby. That's a massive game today. Whoever loses will probably be going home.
Superb. Thank you, Chris. Good, and also to Tom and to Di there for that egg-chasing roundup. OK, coming up, the non-binary loophole that has seen men gate-crash a women's tech conference. We'll be discussing that and more in Headline Makers. That's next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 8:49. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin.
Yeah, joining us to go through some of the day's headlines now, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. And it's lovely to see you both again. Right, Nigel, the NHS has got to modernise or die. Who said it?
This is Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, who will probably very soon be the Health Secretary. What he wants to do is double the number of scanners in hospitals. His point is that at the moment that the lifespan of a scanner, MRI or CT is 10 years, and 1 in 5 hospitals hasn't had a replacement since the last time Labour were in government.
No.
So yeah, about half of these scanners are out of time.
And of course, what he's saying is he's a walking case for
he says exactly that.
needing
That's
early
right.
diagnosis.
Yes, that had his kidney cancer not been caught early, he might not be around. He might not be around today. So obviously, it's a way of getting waiting lists down, paid for by abolishing non-dom status. He reckons he get £170 million out of that. I mean, no one's going to say this is a bad idea. As long as you can afford it, it's good.
Well, we could say, though, Claire, that this is fiddling at the edges. We could say that a few scanners isn't the issue. We could say, visiting Tony Blair's old mantra, it's time to looking at least parts privatisation of the NHS. Will the Labour Party grasp that nettle?
I think they're going to be very, very uncomfortable to do so. And I mean, this isn't a bad thing, looking at scanners, but you're right, it is sort of fiddling around the edges. And what makes me laugh is this use of the non-dom status tax raid, which I think Labour have spent 2 or 3 times over, at the very least. They're pledging to spend £171 million a year over the next Parliament. That's a lot of money to raise out of one tax, which they've used somewhere else as well. So, yes, I think they have to face up to the facts they might have to privatise some. And
don't people that get taxed heavily just move away from the country?
They do. They'll take their money away with them. So it's not a never-ending pot.
OK, another story that's caught our attention here. Dale Vince. Of course, Dale Vince, of course, the founder of the Ecotricity over in Stroud there. He's been criticised in the past for donating £1.5 million to the Labour Party. Now he said the pot is dry. Why?
Well, it's not necessarily the pot is dry for Labour, but I think it is the pot is dry for Just Stop Oil. Now, he is free, obviously, to donate to the political party of his choosing. And what he's going to do now is that because the link with the Labour Party and Just Stop Oil has been picked up by the Conservative Party, and quite rightly so, and been used as an issue, he feels that it is a distraction. He is now not going to fund Just Stop Oil, but is looking to put his efforts into Just Vote, which is a group, a platform, a campaign group to encourage younger people to vote. Now, we saw from your package earlier that I think young people are actually more engaged now than they ever have been. And my concern is because he is a Labour supporter and a Labour donor, any institution campaign group that he sets up is going to have a political bias.
So Just Vote means Just Vote Labour?
That's what I take it to mean, yeah. And I'm distinctly uncomfortable about that.
Basically. Nigel, how much of an issue is this kind of link to Just Stop Oil going to be for Keir Starmer? He shares their stance on North Sea oil. He wants to just stop North Sea oil, despite the fact we could become more energy sovereign. Is this net zero wedge issue we've now seen opened up with Rishi going to become an issue for the Labour Party, or do you think they'll stand firm and say, no, the future's renewables?
Well, I think that he will stand firm and say the future's renewables. I mean, he's also gone back on a few things. That the idea was to spend £28 billion on making Britain green. He was talking about a new company, state-owned company, Great British Energy. All those things are now seemingly put back. I mean, he can't borrow the money because interest rates are so high, so you can understand it. But yes, I mean, he's still determined to go ahead and hit net zero.
Is that attainable, Claire? I mean, when One of the things that there has been a bit of a bounce for Rishi on this wedge issue of when it comes down to affordability, you have to get a new boiler, you have to get a new car, you're getting taxed to the hilt on net zero. When it's the pounds and the pence in the pocket and not the principle of or the prospect of net zero, do you think Rishi's made the right move?
I do, and I think that politics should be about bringing people along with you, not forcing something upon them and telling them to do it and stuff the cost. Because it's not quite as simple as that. It's not quite as simple as, well, go and buy yourself an electric car. Right, OK, they're very expensive. We don't have the grid infrastructure. We don't have the charging infrastructure. And we have seen that the battery life is not great. So until those problems are sorted out, I think it's inherently wrong to force people to change. But it is a very expensive way of doing something that people are already doing. I think that we do need to look at alternative fuel, we need to look at solar, we need to look at wind and nuclear for a start, but those all come in with planning problems. So I think that it's not wrong to look at climate change, but I think it's quite wrong to force that cost upon people who are struggling currently.
Meanwhile, before we run out of time, can we end on a lovely romantic note, the latest romantic note in the story of Akshata and Rishi Sunak? Nigel, you know about this.
Yes, indeed. So the Prime Minister's revealed that he first met her the first party he took her to when they were dating was to a Halloween party, and he was dressed as Harry Potter. So presumably...
Do you know he could carry that off?
But presumably after that, he took her to a game of Quidditch.
We've got a photograph of that. I would love to see a photograph.
I don't think so. I think...
Here we go. What have we got?
Look, that's...
I think it's a bit of a mock-up.
I think that's a mock-up by the Sun newspaper or something, isn't it? Nigel and Claire, thank you so much for joining us. Can I just say that, obviously, it's party conference season at the moment, and we're looking forward to the Labour one, which starts tomorrow, but today is the conference of the Reform UK party. And in the next hour, we're going to be joined by Nigel Farage. Now, if you've got a question you would like us to put to him, then do get in touch. The usual way, gbviews@gbnews.com. What question would you like to put to Nigel Farage today?
If this is your chance to barrage to Farage. We're back after this. This is GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock on Saturday, the 7th of October. These are the stories we've been covering for you this morning.
Have you noticed it's turned much warmer recently? Apparently, we're experiencing an October heatwave in the next few days.
After the Labour Party heralded yesterday's success in the by-election as seismic, today we've been asking, is there still a chance for Scottish independence at all?
There's bigger issues to sort out than independence.
I think it's dead. We've not heard much about it now. It used to be all over the news, but you don't hear it now.
And over stateside, a New York appeals court temporarily halted Donald Trump's property dissolution amid his civil fraud case appeal.
And still to come, thousands of motorcyclists will make their annual pilgrimage to the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire as part of a special event, and we'll find out more about that in a few minutes.
And of course, Jonathan Vautry has your weather.
Some of us will be seeing some very warm sunshine today. For others, though, there's heavy, persistent rainfall in the forecast. So do join me later for all the details of what you can expect.
Well, it's lovely to be with you. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Ooh, sorry about... We've had quite a few people say, we're watching from the north and we're really fed up with you talking about heat waves that we're not going to get.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. I've lost, actually.
Yeah, people are getting in touch about that, saying it's OK for you southerners, but what about us lot?
Jan says, have you any idea how depressing it is to hear constantly throughout the programme how lovely the weather is at the moment? I live in North Yorkshire and the skies are grey at the moment.
Yeah, that is it. Daryl says, it's my 53rd birthday today. Happy birthday, Daryl. And I should be taking in the spectacular scenery, walking on the Pennine Way around Holmfirth and Marsden, calling into a few watering holes on the way around to sample some real ales. Daryl, that sounds like a perfect day.
If you get good weather on the Pennine Way, it will be wonderful.
Wish I was there, mate.
We were talking about what winters and summers were like when you were younger and whether they were better. Bob in Sheffield says, my birthday is 23rd of July, and as a child, I remembered it rained on all of my birthdays. I'm 68.
Yeah, and Joe was pointing out we're getting carried away with the weather being good now, but July and August this year were, without fear of contradiction, the worst summer months ever. No sun, just rain.
Oh, here we go. Diane in Swansea says, in 1970, I was a Butlins redcoat at Clacton. My memory is it rained for most of that season. We always talked about great weather when children sit their GCSEs. That's true. That's true.
Stuff.
I remember always having to sit exams when it was really hot and sunny outside.
Seems so unfair.
It was. I suppose we've always moaned about the weather, really, haven't we?
It's a national pastime, Anne.
Well, of course it is.
Where we'd be without it.
What we're all about, yeah. Wonderful stuff. OK, well, we're talking about the weather, and we'll talk about the weather right now, but I do apologise for those of you who are probably just north of North Yorkshire who are going to get torrential rain. Because, well, we might be thinking winter's not here quite yet, because those of us in the south, well, south of North Yorkshire, we seem to be seeing it as, will look at temperatures of at least 22 degrees for the next 5 days.
Yeah, temperatures today could reach 25 degrees and up to 27 degrees on Sunday down south, making it unusually and unseasonably warm for an October.
Well, earlier we spoke to weather journalist Nathan Rao. Here is how he explained it.
This hot weather, the high pressure that's causing this is going right across the country. So the south is going to get the warmest of the temperatures. This always happens when we get warm air coming up from the south. But really, all of the UK is going to be warm, apart from Scotland and the very north, over the next 2 days. 27 degrees possibly the highest temperature we'll get tomorrow, which is very unusual because the average for this time of year is about 10 degrees.
Well, of course, the big question will be how unusual is it? Andy says here he remembers in October 2011 it was just like this. But of course, when the weather's like this these days, everyone goes, oh my God, you know, it's climate change, the end of the world is nigh.
Yeah.
How unusual is this? And is it something we should be concerned about or something we should just enjoy?
Right. Now, Andy is right, because in 2011, on the 1st of October, we got 29.9 degrees, and that was the record. Now, in terms of why we're getting this, and is this something we should be worried about, and is this something we're going to see more of, and then we start very carefully tiptoeing around this discussion of climate change. We're certainly seeing more and more unusual weather events, but I'm always very, very firm on that we have to separate these issues of weather and climate. Now, climate is an average of weather events taken over a period of time, and weather is an observation of things which happen immediately, changes in wind direction, temperature, pressure, all that sort of thing. And I think you've got to separate the two, because this is where the hysteria comes. Now, the climate is certainly changing, and there is a link to say that the probability of unusual or extreme events, weather events, increases with the changing climate. So there is a link there, but I think it is wrong, and I think it's unscientific to look at every single unusual weather event or extreme weather event, be it heat waves, and go, that's climate change. It's not. It may have been made more probable by climate change, but I think to keep this discussion sensible and scientific, we need to keep that distinction and keep it balanced. So yes, these things could become more probable as we look at climate change going forward, but then again, they might not happen.
You can't get away from the fact, though, that we seem to be breaking records all the time with our temperatures.
And even this year, I mean, we have the hottest June on record. We've had the beginning of September, we saw 30 degrees for 7 days in a row, which was a record. We've had the hottest September, the joint hottest September on record.
We had a miserable July.
We had a very miserable July, yes, that was miserable. But overall, we seem to be looking at records, and not just in the UK, but if you remember a couple of months ago, we were talking about the Cerberus heatwave in Europe, which was absolutely astonishing.
One thing...
Oh, sorry, I was just wondering if the way we're getting our temperatures is changing, in that I just remember, and I don't know whether it's just because, you know, I'm looking back through rose-coloured specs, but I seem to remember that July and August, my mum and dad used to take us down to Torquay or something on the south coast, and you knew you were going to get a week or two of really good baking weather. And now we get the high temperatures, but we only get them in short spurts.
Yes.
And then it's horrible again.
Yes.
And then maybe you come along a bit later and you say, all right, we'll do another 5 days of good weather. It's not like it used to be.
It isn't, and actually this is a very interesting discussion, because not only is the summer not like it used to be, but the winter as well. I mean, it's now the beginning of October, and I always remember when I was at school wrapping up for October and bonfire night and being freezing cold, and you'd always get snow in December. And now December is pretty much, we're looking at temperatures every year around 15 degrees. You know, we're always looking for this white Christmas, and I cover this stuff every year, and every Christmas I'm looking at it as well, and we're recording temperatures in the teens, and it's all very unusual. And then we get the snow later on in January. So there is a definite change going on. You know, no one can deny that the weather is changing. Now, the discussion is whether that's a climate change man-made thing or whether it's a cyclical.
OK, it's been a busy week as Rishi Sunak was trying to reset the politics in his speech at the Tory party conference in Manchester. And Labour says it has changed for the better after their win in the by-election in Rutherglen and Hamilton West in Scotland, where they wiped out the SNP. Well, joining us now to digest all of these stories is our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. Top of the morning, Tom. Let's start with action north of the border. So Keir Starmer will be licking his lips at the seeming dissolution, the falling apart of the SNP. Is the dream of independence withering on the vine?
Well, certainly Sir Keir Starmer will be a happy man heading towards Liverpool this morning, where, of course, he's increased the number of MPs in his parliamentary party by one, doubling his representation in Scotland. And, as you say, certainly moving towards a situation where the SNP appears to be on the back foot. This was, of course, the first national electoral test of the SNP since Humza Yousaf became the party leader north of the border, and indeed since the scandal involving involving Nicola Sturgeon and 2 other senior individuals within the SNP, all of whom were arrested and then released following questions and a police investigation, Operation Branch Form, over this missing £600,000 earmarked for the fight for independence. Clearly, this has had some electoral effect, and if we're to believe projections and pollsters, this could mean that the SNP lose as many as 30 seats at the next general election.
So, Tom, also Keir Starmer is due, I think, any minute in Liverpool to arrive for the Labour Party conference. A lot of front pages today dominated by Labour, talking about a partial privatisation, maybe, of the health service. Wes Streeting talking about that. Angela Rayner talking about social housing. We were told yesterday by Pat McFadden to expect policy-rich information. Can we expect some meat on the bone? Will finally the real Keir Starmer stand up?
That certainly is the media intention, the projection that the Labour Party would like to present over the next 4 or 5 days in Liverpool. Clearly, the criticism of this party has been that they have not been particularly forthcoming with policy. They've been speaking about the rough areas that they'd like to see, planning reform, but we haven't seen the details of that planning reform. They've spoken about a new energy company, Great British Energy, but again, the details have been sparse. Perhaps this year is the year where we're heading into a general election, perhaps even within the next 12 months, when we're going to be needing to see that detail. And we have heard in the papers this morning some hints towards that detail. As you mentioned, Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, putting some more meat on the bones with regard to healthcare reform, although I think I'd stop short at describing it as a part privatisation. Wes Streeting has said in the past he wants to use more private provision of service within the NHS in the same way that Tony Blair did, but of course still funded through general taxation, still free at the point of use. It's an area that of course is contentious and divides the left and the right of the Labour Party, but of course Wes Streeting has always painted himself in the mould of Mr Blair, so perhaps we'll hear more of that too. But of course housing will also be the other big issue. How will they deliver their extra housing pledges? That will be a big question.
OK, Tom Harwood, thank you for that update.
Now, as you've probably gathered, it's party conference season. And today, the Reform UK Party Conference is about to take place here in London. Joining us now is the Honorary President of the party, Nigel Farage. But why, I wonder, is he bothering with his own party conference when he was clearly the toast of the Tories just a few days ago, with rock star-like status, at least at certain fringe events, and Rishi Sunak even sort of suggesting that he might welcome Nigel back into the fold. Just have a look at these rock star scenes.
I'm going to show my mum.
No problem. You enjoying it?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much. Thank you.
No way. No way.
Yeah, come on.
No. Just go. No, don't worry about it. So they're all good, you think? Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Would you mind just kindly taking a picture, please?
All right. We've got Labour and Conservative houses who, frankly, are almost similar to each other. But I think this party, the Conservative Party, needs to work out what it is.
Well, what did I say? Welcome to Nigel Farage. You obviously had a very good time at the conference.
I did. It was interesting. I was amazed to see so many young delegates at the conference.
And they were swarming around you.
I really was. I seem to be very popular with them. It seems like they and some of the older delegates are rather like a lost tribe. You know, they want to believe in a Conservative Party. They're not quite sure what it really stands for anymore. They don't really know.
But they bothered to go, hadn't they?
They bother to go. They're interested and they want to believe. So all of that was great.
Did it surprise you?
The warmth of the response did surprise me.
Because it wasn't only from the youngsters. You're making that point now, but I happen to have seen you dancing with Priti Patel.
Well, there was a bit of that
Yeah,
too.
there was a bit of that. Shall we have a look? It wasn't just... That's what's so interesting.
Dear.
It wasn't just the youngsters doing their TikTok-type videos. There was a tremendous amount of warmth there amongst, frankly, the Tory faithful and some of the unfaithful, who were clearly... and you were very clearly enjoying yourself too. Why did you go?
Well, I went with the GB News badge, of course, and I was broadcasting from there.
Yeah, so you did do your programme from there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But also, and I hadn't been to a Tory party conference for a very, very long time.
Not since the 80s,
Not since the 80s, yes. I was fascinated to go and meet the delegates. And what was interesting was the real energy was on the fringe. Most of the speeches in the hall were pretty dull.
Yeah, they were pretty.
I mean, the Chancellor's speech, and, it's all pretty dull.
Yeah.
And Rishi tried hard, but
yes, yeah,
not exactly great theatre. It's a party that knows it'll lose the next election. It's a party that is already beginning to have a debate about where it goes after the next election. And whilst I was welcomed by delegates, I most certainly would not be welcomed by the Conservative Parliamentary Party.
Is that true? Mind you, why would you want to be welcomed back when, as you've just said, they're going to lose?
Well, firstly, they're going to lose. And secondly, I still think on some very major issues, they're in the wrong place. You know, think about the average family's life. What worries them? You know, can their kids get a house of any kind at all? Can their elderly parents get a GP appointment when something's wrong? We're off to, visit our cousins for Sunday lunch. It used to take an hour. We better allow 2 hours now, hadn't we?
Or not get there at all.
Or not get there at all. We are living the most enormous elephant in the room of British politics is the level of legal migration into Britain. Migration into Britain.
Now, this is an interesting one because we noticed earlier that on your Reform UK paraphernalia, you've actually put in the word Brexit again. Do you feel that word now needs to belong to you again because the Tories have failed Brexit?
Yes, I mean, we lent it to them. We lent it to them and
maybe you gave it up too soon.
Well, there was an election, and it was either Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister or a Liberal Democrat, Jeremy Corbyn coalition, a second referendum, and goodness knows what else.
So you gave Boris Johnson the Brexit ticket?
Absolutely, and it was the right thing to do. It was
the
right thing to do at the time.
Now you look back on it?
No, because I think a lot of people... I mean, there's no question, on the world stage, with Brexit, we stand taller. Whether it's the AUKUS deal, whether it's leadership in Ukraine, but domestically there are millions of people who voted Brexit because they actually wanted numbers coming into Britain to go down. They've gone up, they feel betrayed. Many small business people feel very, very badly betrayed. So, yes, we are reclaiming the word Brexit.
Yes, because you've said many times now they failed to deliver Brexit.
I'm afraid
so it's not the sort of Brexit you wanted, certainly.
No, and it's not the sort of Brexit that over 17 million people voted for. So there is great disappointment. I mean, look, an 80-seat majority. Boris Johnson had the world at his feet. There was so much they could do, and yet it's been, frankly, just chaos.
Now, Reform UK, with its conference today, isn't going to win the next election.
No, it isn't going to win the next election.
But you must obviously feel that the word Brexit now, hanging it back onto Reform UK, will improve your chances just by the recognition of the word.
I'll tell you what's amazing, is that Reform UK does not have a very high recognition. You're right about that, and we understand that and recognise that.
It's not a great name, is it?
Well, everything needs reforming, from the electoral system to the House of Lords to the National Health Service. I mean, this is broken Britain. It is in need of great reform. But despite that, it's still running at 8% in the opinion polls, higher in some. I mean, it's on course to get millions of votes, and it is going to get millions of votes. And I think what I'm going to say to them today is the real opportunity is this whole legal net migration, plus the fact that no one's got the wit or the courage to deal with what's coming across the English Channel.
What are you going to say to them then about dealing with the Channel problem and the migration?
We'll never deal with it. All the while we're part of the European Convention on Human Rights. And that wasn't even... ECR wasn't even mentioned by Sunak, or, believe it or not, Suella Braverman didn't mention it. The week before she she did not mention it.
And you are going to make a meal of that today, are you?
Absolutely, because this is one of the biggest, most important issues in our country, affecting the quality of life of every family. Nobody else wants to address
OK, so we pull out of the European Court of Human Rights. What do we then do with that independent power? What would you then do?
What we've done, we've gone for endless, cheap labour coming into Britain, both unskilled and skilled. We've de-skilled our own young people, sending them off to university in their millions to get degrees that haven't particularly helped them. We have genuine skill shortages. We have shortages of nurses. We've got so much wrong over the course of the last few years. And I can't pretend this can be turned around in a couple of minutes. What I can tell you is this. I think that what Reform do in terms of its broad manifesto, how we get on, in the next election in terms of numbers of votes, reform will be pivotal in reshaping where the centre-right of politics goes after the next election. I think there's no doubt after that Scottish result that Labour are going to win a majority, but we have to see what kind of Conservative party is it going to be.
Do you think you personally can exert the same sort of influence you did during the Brexit years? I mean, they say you are one of the most influential, if not the most influential person on British politics in the last 10, maybe 15, 20 years. Do you think you can, even if you're not with a party that's actually in power, can you exert that same sort of influence?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
How?
Look,
just by being a thorn in everyone's side?
Well, I'm good at that, obviously. But, I mean, you know, if you look at the 2015 UKIP manifesto, right, which and I was condemned for what was in that manifesto. If you then take the 2019 manifesto that Boris Johnson won an 80-seat majority on, you find a lot of it is very, very similar.
Yes.
So a lot of the rhetoric that I've pushed over the years has been copied by the Conservatives, but they haven't delivered on any of it. And you can read the Times or any of these metropolitan newspapers to your heart's content. You get outside the M25 and you actually find that out there in this country, people are very sceptical of paying the cost of net zero, very concerned about levels of net migration. These are all things that aren't even talked about in most news.
But do you know what upsets me when you say Britain is broken?
Yeah.
I find that a very dismal outlook. And then I know that a lot of people would say, well, you're the reason Britain is broken. We should still be part of the EU. We would be much more successful with our friends around us.
Well, have a look at the mess they're in. I mean, you know, despite our problems, our GDP figures since we left the European Union are higher than both France's, way higher, actually, than those of Germany. And you can see with this summit that's been going on in Spain, I mean, they're warring with each other within the European Union. Even the governor of the Bank of England, and I'm not a great fan of Andrew Bailey, said actually Brexit has made managing the city easier than it was as members of the Union. So this isn't about, you know, this isn't about that. Broken Britain is about our public services. Broken Britain is about the population crisis. We have a population crisis. We haven't got the schools, the hospitals, the houses, or the roads to deal with it. And this has not been discussed. It's not been debated by anybody, and we're going to make some noise about it.
And you're going to make sure it's sort of the top of everybody's agenda, not just yours.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I've got a track record of doing those things.
You certainly have. My goodness. Natasha has asked, I'd like to ask if Nigel's a little suspicious of this sudden interest in him from the Conservative Party. They always want you then when they're in trouble.
Of course. No, she's absolutely right. And you know, was it Michael Fabricant and one or two others say, oh, well, we should beg him to come back and please, Nigel, can you save the next election for us? Well, you know, I'll be honest with you. Not only will they lose the next election, they deserve to lose the next election.
Okay.
And I feel that very strongly.
And Chris has asked, what does it really say about us as a country if we pull out of the European Court of Human Rights? I mean, it was set up in part by Winston Churchill and this country.
Well, yes, I mean, we know that's 70 years ago. It's more than 70 years ago. And it was set up to deal with the way in which Jews were being treated in the 30s in Germany.
But human rights, human basic rights, refugee rights, they're still the same, aren't they?
No. Freedoms are far more important than state-given rights. I'm not a great believer in state-given human rights. I'm a great believer in liberty, great believer in freedom. The world's moved on in 70 years. This is an outdated court with outdated ideas that through judicial activism has reached way beyond the original scope and intention.
But even those of us who want to stand up against the state, and look how you've had to stand up against the banks, for instance, if you can't appeal to a higher authority, you can only appeal against your own state government, then you're very, very limited, aren't you?
Hang on. We are the country of Magna Carta. We are the country of liberty, of freedom. We have a judicial system which may not be perfect, but is a damn sight better than that exists in America or most of the rest of Europe. We don't need foreign judges interfering in our decisions about how we control our borders, whether we can get rid of terrorists like Abu Qatada. It took us 10 years to get rid of him because of the meddling of this court. If we left it, what does it say about us? Was the question. It says we are actually going into the 21st century and leaving the mid-20th century behind.
Are you sure it doesn't make us a meaner, nastier nation?
We are not a mean and nasty
Well, I
nation.
don't believe we are.
No, we're
I
not.
worry about what would happen to us if we leave the European Court of Human Rights.
What we need is more self-confidence, more belief that we're good enough to set our own laws, to run a good, free, fair country, without having to refer to some obscure group of people in Strasbourg, many of whom, by the way, are not even legally trained.
I'm going to leave you there because I know you've got to rush off and actually make your speech, and it'll be fascinating to hear you. We're going to cross live, I think, to Liverpool because we've got Keir Starmer, I think, arriving at first day
for the
of the Labour
future
Party conference.
and show that Labour is the party of change and that Labour is Britain's future. So a really, really good opportunity for us to set out our case. We're all looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
OK, well, that was short and sweet, wasn't it? But there you are. That's day one of the Labour Party conference. Nigel has just gone off to hold his party conference as well. In the meantime, one of the biggest news stories of the days has been the weather. So shall we catch up with that right now?
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry, here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Certainly a different feeling day for those in the north to those in the south. High pressure is pushing in from continental Europe, importing heat for southern areas, but this trailing frontal system is going to be providing very heavy and persistent rain across much of Scotland throughout the day. There is an amber weather warning in force with flooding and disruption to transport likely in places, the potential for a month's worth of rainfall to fall in some locations. It may even lead to some shallow landslides, so do take care. For Northern Ireland, Wales and England, a largely dry day, some hazy sunshine around at times, temperatures climbing towards 23 degrees Celsius in the southeast, where we'd normally be around 16 degrees at this time of the year. The rain will continue, though, across Scotland as we head overnight. Again, some heavy pulses around at times. Other areas generally staying dry, but we'll start to see some cloud push into eastern areas of England overnight, turning a little bit murkier here. Most of us, though, seeing temperatures hold up around 12 to 13 degrees Celsius, so a fairly mild start to Sunday. The rain across Scotland will gradually push its way northwards during the day on Sunday. Still some heavy pulses for Aberdeenshire, the Highlands to begin with, and then eventually into the Northern Isles later on. The cloud in the east will be a bit stubborn to clear throughout the morning, but into the afternoon some brighter spells should develop, but it will be Wales, southwest England that sees the best of the sunshine. On Sunday, temperatures, though, again climbing towards 25 degrees Celsius in parts of London. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
OK, coming up, we'll be live from Staffordshire, where thousands of motorcyclists will gather for a special service of remembrance. This is GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 9:30. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin on GB News.
Right, here's the latest news coming into our newsroom right now. The Palestinian Islamist movement Hamas has launched the biggest attack on Israel in years in a surprise assault that combined gunmen crossing the border with a heavy barrage of rockets fired from the Gaza Strip. As warning sirens sounded across the southern and central of Israel, including in Jerusalem, Israel's military said it was on a war footing as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called an emergency meeting of security officials.
Serious story there. And the UK is on course to see its biggest tax rise in at least 50 years as a result of the freeze on personal thresholds and soaring inflation. According to new analysis by the Resolution Foundation, taxpayers are set to hand over a whopping £40 billion a year by 2028, up from a forecast of £30 billion at the time of Chancellor Jeremy Hunt's budget in March. It comes as Mr Hunt's ruled out sizable tax cuts this year amid Tory calls for a pre-election tax giveaway at the Conservative Party conference.
And northern and southern parts of the UK will continue to see a contrast in weather this weekend, with high temperatures and torrential rainfall affecting different areas. The Met Office has issued both amber and yellow rain warnings for large parts of Scotland and northern England right through to tomorrow morning. And train services in Scotland are expected to be disrupted, with some operators warning passengers not to travel.
OK, time now for News Matters. This week, after much speculation, Rishi Sunak finally announced his plan to redirect £36 billion of funding from the HS2 project to revolutionise transport across the North and Midlands.
And that effectively means the north leg of the high-speed railway, that's HS2, linking Birmingham and Manchester, will no longer happen.
And this was what he said at the Tory party conference in Manchester earlier this week.
I am ending this long-running saga. I am cancelling the rest of the HS2 project. And in its place, we will reinvest every single penny, £36 billion, in hundreds of new transport projects in the North and the Midlands across the country. This means £36 billion of investment in the projects that will make a real difference across our nation. No government has ever developed a more ambitious scheme for northern transport than our new Network North. This is the right way to drive growth and spread opportunity across our country, to level up. With our new Network North, you will be able to get from Manchester to the new station in Bradford in 30 minutes, Sheffield in 42 minutes, and to Hull in 84 minutes on a fully electrified line.
Okay, joining us now is our travel guru, Simon Calder. Good morning to you, Simon. So it was anticipated, it happened, he dropped the axe on HS2. Was that the right thing to do in terms of the public purse, and the alternatives, do they stack up as a decent solution?
Not at all. Look, he said in the foreword to the very, very long and detailed story about what they were going to do instead, which miraculously, since he'd only made his mind up on the morning, was quite surprising because it was very, very well detailed. He said HS2 would only benefit tens of thousands of people from a handful of stations every day. This is utter nonsense, and I assume he and the Transport Secretary Mark Harper and the Rail Minister Hugh Merriman know it. What it was going to do was what the motorways do for the nation. The reason you've got the M1, the M6, the M5, the M4 and all of those is partly to allow people and goods to get around quickly, but it's also to take the pressure off the local transport network. And that's exactly what the original vision, which government after government has signed up for, which is to have a line going to Birmingham, splitting, going to Manchester, going to Leeds via Sheffield, and then the absolutely essential part, which is Northern Powerhouse Rail going across from Liverpool to Manchester. And if you take that away and you just leave this kind of stump of a line going possibly from London Euston, maybe just from a patch of wasteland in West London to Birmingham, you have saddled future generations with most of the costs and very few of the benefits.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I can't understand. You're the travel expert. You almost hope that you can make more sense of it than the rest of us can, because it makes no sense to us why you would not go all the way to Euston and why they started building the whole thing from south to north anyway. If you'd had to abandon it now and it had been built from north downwards, that would have made more sense anyhow, wouldn't it?
Well, you need
to be left with something.
You need the whole thing, or you need nothing, or rather, you are simply not getting the benefits. And look, in decades to come, of course, we will have something which looks like the original HS2 plan, but it will be decades late. It will cost even more cash. And of course, by re-specifying yet again, after so many changes of mind, each one of which adds a few billion to the price, the cost is just going to balloon even further. It is going to go down in history as probably the worst managed infrastructure project of all time, and who knows when it will open. And it has just left me speechless that they could commit such vandalism, an act of national vandalism, which is just going to cause endless harm. It was a dreadfully run project. It needed to be got under control, but suddenly just to say, we were going to have 17 trains an hour going from Scotland, going from North Wales, going from Leeds, going from Sheffield, going from Newcastle, all funneling into this high-speed line. Now we're going to have 8 trains an hour, and most of them are just going to be going to and from Birmingham. Fantastic news for Birmingham, actually, because all those companies that were going to invest in the north are now going to think, oh no, well, we're going to move to the West Midlands instead. But for everybody else, it's a disaster.
OK, Simon Calder, thank you for that update on HS2. We're going to have to leave it there, and we are now going to a break, but please stay with us. This is GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other pay-per-review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
And a very warm welcome back. Sadly, we're having to bring to you this breaking news that Israel has declared war readiness, that's what they're calling it, after surprise attacks from the Gaza Strip. Dozens of gunmen from the Palestinian militant group Hamas have infiltrated southern Israel from the Gaza Strip in a completely surprise attack.
Yeah, videos being shared on social media appear to show Palestinian militants shooting at passers-by in the streets of the Israeli town of Sderot.
Yeah, an intense Palestinian rocket fire from Gaza has also killed one Israeli woman. That's the most we know at the moment. Israel's defence minister said Hamas had made a grave mistake and launched a war against his country.
Yeah, Mr. Gallant added Israeli troops are fighting the enemy at every location. The state of Israel will win this war.
The Israel Defence Forces said it had moved to a war footing and that dozens of fighter jets were carrying out airstrikes now on Hamas sites in Gaza.
And the rocket barrages from Gaza, which is governed, of course, by Hamas, began just after dawn today at the end of the Jewish holiday of Sukkot.
As sirens sounded across Israel, the IDF announced that terrorists, they called them terrorists, had infiltrated Israeli territory in a number of different locations.
And meanwhile, it told civilians in southern and central areas to stay next to air raid shelters and inside shelters in the surrounding area of Gaza around where those rockets are landing.
And if you're listening on the radio, we're showing pictures at the moment that are coming to us live from Gaza. And you can see there across the horizon smoke coming up from what looks like rocket attacks in obviously a very built-up area. There are lots of videos on posted online at the moment. Some footage appeared to show a group of heavily armed Palestinian militants dressed in black fatigues driving around in a pickup truck.
Yeah, and in one video, the same Hamas militants seem to be exchanging gunfire with Israeli forces on the streets of the town, which is a mere 1 mile from Gaza.
There are also unconfirmed reports in the Palestinian media that a number of Israelis have been taken captive by militants, and there's footage circulating of Palestinians in Gaza driving Israeli military vehicles.
And a significant escalation here. The rocket barrages, meanwhile, have continued, with Israeli media reporting that more than 2,200 projectiles had so far been launched towards Israel.
Just to remind you, you're watching us here on Breakfast, here on GB News, but we're having to bring to you this very latest breaking news, which is coming from Israel. We're seeing smoke in the distance, very built-up areas, and there we're talking about Hamas attacking Israel. There's been a barrage of rockets launched into Israel from the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, multiple explosion sites there, plumes of smoke pouring up across Gaza. You can see rockets there. The footage on screen shows rockets flying into a heavily built-up area, densely populated, leaving trails across the sky. Plumes of explosions on the ground, smoke billowing up in the area now, clearly resembling a war zone.
Right, we're looking at this at the moment, and you can see those rocket trails in the sky. But obviously, we're only learning minute to minute about things like casualties. An initial report said 1 person had been killed in the rocket attacks, 16 others wounded. But you only have to look at these pictures to know that those numbers are going to go up. A hospital in the southern city of Ashkelon later said it was treating 68 casualties alone. Another hospital reported 80 others. This is a very serious situation happening at this very moment.
And in a severe ramping up of rhetoric here, a senior Hamas military commander announced the start of the operation in a broadcast on Hamas media, calling on Palestinians everywhere to take up arms and fight. Mohammed Daif said this: "This is the day of the greatest battle to end the last occupation on earth."
And we've just heard from our own Foreign Secretary that this obviously has been utterly condemned by him and I imagine the rest of the government. Obviously, there's going to be a tremendous amount of reaction to this in the coming minutes. But the time at the moment, 9:45, you're listening and watching GB News Breakfast. Sadly, with this appalling news that there are very serious conditions going on in Israel with Hamas attacking at the moment.
In case you're just joining us, Israel has declared war after being attacked by Hamas. As we just said, up to 2,200 projectiles have landed in Gaza from the occupied Palestinian area, and it's been declared as an act of war. Both sides now calling this open war.
I mean, this has only been happening in the last few minutes. The Palestinian Islamist group Hamas has launched the biggest attack on Israel in years in a surprise assault that combined gunmen crossing into several Israeli towns with a heavy barrage of rockets fired from the Gaza Strip.
And you can see live footage on screen now. If you can't see that on the radio, it is explosions, rockets landing in very, very densely populated areas next to tower blocks, as Anne just mentioned, hospitals, huge explosions going off in a very residential area.
Yes, warning sirens wailing across southern and central Israel, including in Jerusalem. Israel's military said it was on a war footing, and the defence minister said the Iran-backed Hamas had made a grave mistake by declaring war on Israel.
And just coming in, hundreds of people are being treated in Israeli hospitals, and with at least one Israeli woman killed by this intense rocket fire from the Gaza Strip. That news just in. We now have the first fatalities, and it seems hundreds of casualties being treated in Israeli hospitals in now what is a escalating act of warfare. Live images now on screen. As you can see there, plumes of smoke right across the horizon around Gaza, and they are increasing. More explosions there. It looks like a complete war zone there.
Yeah, we're bringing you the very latest pictures and the very latest news, though things are clearly developing fast in that situation. The Israeli military said it had launched airstrikes into Gaza, where witnesses reported hearing heavy explosions there. The attack marks an unprecedented infiltration by an unknown number of Hamas gunmen into Israel from Gaza, and one of the most serious escalations in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in years.
Yeah, and a senior commander from Hamas is affirming the claim made by the Israelis. He's saying himself that, yes, thousands of rockets have been launched from Gaza into Israel. Confirmation now from Hamas of what the Israelis claim. Thousands of projectiles raining into a very densely populated area with hundreds of casualties already reported and at least one Israeli woman reported dead.
Israeli media reporting that gunmen had opened fire on passers-by in the street in Sderot in southern Israel. And there is footage, as you can imagine, circulating on social media, appearing to show clashes in city streets, as well as gunmen in jeeps roaming the countryside.
Yeah, and the Israeli military now has confirmed it's began striking targets in the Gaza Strip in response to what it calls to the barrages of rockets. So now Israel striking back, bombs firing either way, rockets firing either way across this occupied, very densely populated area in Gaza.
And on social media that we're seeing, there's a report from a young woman named Devere, who is in a kibbutz. She's told Israeli army radio from her bomb shelter. She says, "We were told there are terrorists inside our kibbutz. We can hear gunfire."
And reports here saying that Israel was caught off guard in a huge intelligence failure. This is a colossal intelligence failure for Israel. The country has one of the most extensive and sophisticated intelligence networks in the Middle East, both domestic and internal and external. That was breached, reports here, by, it appears, jeeps just driving into the area and soldiers pouring out and just opening fire on civilians in the street.
It's 10 to 10. We're bringing you the very latest news as we can at the moment from Israel, with these reports just a few minutes ago that Hamas has launched an unprecedented attack on areas of Israel. Hamas media displaying videos of what it said was bodies of Israeli soldiers brought into Gaza by fighters, and Palestinian gunmen inside Israeli homes, and touring an Israeli town in jeeps, reportedly being driven into Israel by the attackers. And obviously, if you're listening on the radio at the moment, we're seeing terrible footage of explosions going off and cars on fire in the streets.
It looks like they're a very densely populated area. There's a car park at what appears to be around tower blocks. All of those vehicles blazing in fire, clearly struck, and by one of those 2,200 rockets that the Israelis are claiming have landed. And indeed, Hamas just confirmed they have indeed fired thousands of projectiles into this area, and we have 200 casualties at least reported in Israeli hospitals and confirmation of at least one woman dead so far.
Headlines in the media quote Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying, "We are at war." Terrifying words, actually, after this very surprise Palestinian attack this morning.
Yeah, and this of course, is a confrontation that's been raging for many, many years, decades. But this is the most serious escalation of anything we've ever seen in this area. Both sides now declaring they are at war, both sides firing rockets at each other. The fighting talk from Hamas, this is an act of warfare, encouraging all Palestinians to take up arms and fight back.
The Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, in Israel said he would meet top security officials in the next few hours, and they're going to authorise the call-up of reservists. And in Gaza, the roar of rocket launches could be heard, and residents have reported armed clashes along the separation with Israel near the southern town of Khan Yunis and said they had seen significant movement of armed fighters.
And it seems to be significant that it's based around a Jewish holiday. Accusations here that the Israeli security forces were caught off guard, asleep at the wheel. We're hearing here during a period where there was a lull, it seems, Hamas were able to launch a surprise attack during this period, just literally driving into Gaza and opening fire on the streets, accompanied by thousands of rockets flying over the border. It seems the Israelis have been caught completely off guard.
Israel's ambulance service said teams had been dispatched to areas in southern Israel near Gaza, and residents were warned to stay inside. And a group representing military reservists who had planned to refuse to attend training over their objections to the government's plans to overhaul the judiciary, well, they've called on reservists to report for duty.
Yeah, Benjamin Netanyahu there saying this is an act of war. Already reports in that Israeli is counter-attacking with rockets flying into Palestinian territory, and no doubt there will be a huge response. There will be a massive force in response from Israel to counter this. And the big question will be, how will they sleep at the wheel? How will Hamas allow just to drive in and start opening fire on the streets, taking casualties, at least 200 injured, 1 dead so far, and the bombs, it appears, still raining in.
Well, we hear that Israeli reservists are now being called up, and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group says its fighters were also joining Hamas now in this terrifying attack.
Grave, grave moments, an escalation of a long-standing dispute.
A very, very sad way for us to end our breakfast programme this Saturday morning. But we obviously stay tuned to GB News. We'll keep you up to date. Now the weather.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Certainly a different feeling day for those in the north to those in the south. High pressure is pushing in from continental Europe, importing heat for southern areas, but this trailing frontal system is going to be providing very heavy and persistent rain across much of Scotland throughout the day. There is an amber weather warning in force, with flooding and disruption to transport likely in places, the potential for a month's worth of rainfall to fall in some locations. It may even lead to some shallow landslides, so do take care. For Northern Ireland, Wales and England, a largely dry day, some hazy sunshine around at times, temperatures climbing towards 23 degrees Celsius in the southeast, where we'd normally be around 16 degrees at this time of the year. The rain will continue, though, across Scotland as we head overnight. Again, some heavy pulses around at times. Other areas generally staying dry, but we'll start to see some cloud push into eastern areas of England overnight, turning a little bit murkier here. Most of us, though, seeing temperatures hold up around 12 to 13 degrees Celsius, so a fairly mild start to Sunday. The rain across Scotland will gradually push its way northwards during the day on Sunday. Still some heavy pulses for Aberdeenshire, the Highlands to begin with, and then eventually into the Northern Isles later on. The cloud in the east will be a bit stubborn to clear throughout the morning, but into the afternoon some brighter spells should develop, but it will be Wales, southwest England that sees the